Hey everyone, it's me again. Is everybody doing well? I hope so. Today's story is about a blonde guy who is a complete idiot. He has no talent at all, and he reincarnated inside a female-oriented novel, where he plays the villain and needs to overcome that fate. He also receives a book that looks a lot like the one from Kung Fu Panda. The real power is the friends we make along the way. And please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy it. The story begins at the Campbell house, when a blonde boy suddenly wakes up, completely confused about what is happening around him. As he opens his eyes, he finds himself surrounded by luxurious furniture with Western touches, something that definitely was not part of his previous reality. When he looks in the mirror, he realizes his face looks like it did when he was 16 or 17. The situation was just too strange. He starts wondering if he has traveled through time or been transported to another world. However, according to the cliches he knew, to be taken to another world, you had to be a chubby guy with glasses and get run over by a truck. None of that applied to him. To be sure, he decides to test reality. Without thinking twice, he cuts his own finger and almost immediately regrets the impulsive idea. That pain was real. At that moment, strange memories begin to invade his mind. He discovers that he is now in the body of Moon Campbell, a young noble who had made a grave mistake by insulting the royal family. Because of that, he was exiled and lost all his privileges and noble title. Realizing this, the protagonist starts to panic. Of all the characters he could have reincarnated into, he had the misfortune of waking up in the body of the dumb blonde villain. To understand better, it is worth explaining that in his previous life, the protagonist was also not exactly remarkable. But what scared him the most in that moment was recognizing that he had been thrown into a novel called The Strongest Female Lead in History, and he was in the role of a pathetic villain whose only purpose was to get in the heroine's way before being defeated in the very first arc of the story. The character he now inhabited was undoubtedly a failure, and by extension, he was becoming one too. As he sank deeper into despair, a maid named Anne entered the room to inform him that the young master's outfit for the next day's banquet was ready. It was just a quick visit to let him know, but she soon noticed something odd. Moon's finger was bleeding, and that caught her attention. The boy, trying to play it cool, explained that he had accidentally cut himself with a knife while fooling around. Seeing an opportunity, he asked if Anne had any bandages nearby. However, she replied that there was no need to worry, because she didn't want his precious blood to stain the closet. Instead of offering a bandage, she simply held his hand and brought the injured finger to her mouth, sucking the wound in an unexpected and suggestive way. That gesture made Moon's heart race, especially since right afterwards she kindly asked him not to hurt himself anymore. Her gentleness left him completely defenseless. In that moment, he couldn't help but think how cute his maid was. From Anne's side, however, the reaction was one of confusion. She found it odd that Moon had thanked her, since that wasn't normal behavior for him. Back in the protagonist's thoughts, he begins to reflect on why the character he now controlled had been so annoying to the heroine of the story. Moon Campbell's downfall, as he recalled, had been caused by a terrible crime. He had put a drug in the third princess's drink during her coming-of-age ceremony. It was a low and unforgivable act. Now, with this information in mind, the protagonist realizes that everything could be different. If he simply avoided provoking the heroine and stayed out of trouble, he might be able to escape a tragic fate. The problem was timing. Connecting the dots, he remembers that the coming-of-age ceremony would take place exactly the next day. Anne herself had mentioned it when talking about the banquet clothes. Panic takes over him again. He starts calling out internally for help, pleading to a system, to God, to Buddha, to some monk, to any entity that could save him. After all, theoretically, he had been granted the luck of a second life. He had been reborn in a new world, and that should be a blessing. However, he ended up in the body of a mediocre character and was about to die before even having the chance to make a single choice. Faced with all this, he concludes that the only possible solution would be to kneel before the heroine the next day and sincerely apologize. Maybe, if it came to that, Moon would even kiss her feet and kneel in public. Anything to try to escape the cruel fate he remembered from the novel. He was determined to follow through with that plan, no matter how humiliating it was, if it meant surviving. While imagining all those crazy possibilities, a book suddenly fell on his head out of nowhere. At first, he didn't understand where it had come from, but soon he thought maybe it was the answer he had asked for from the heavens. He was so desperate for help that he believed that mysterious book could be a divine gift. Even without knowing what it was about, he got excited, believing it might hold the key to escaping his tragic end. However, as soon as he opened the book, his excitement vanished. The pages were completely blank, like those old jokes about mystical scrolls, just like in Kung Fu Panda. Moon began to wonder if there was some special way to activate the book. Maybe a secret word, a hidden command, or maybe it was just a trick played by fate. As he thought about it, a drop of blood from a small cut on his head fell onto the page. In that instant, the book reacted. A dark aura began to spread around Moon, enveloping his body in a strange energy energy until he simply lost consciousness. When he woke up, he realized he was in a terrible state. His body was completely injured, covered in bruises and chained. In front of him appeared Anne, who calmly began tending to his wounds. As she treated him, she spoke with a disturbingly sweet tone. She said the world should hate him, that he should become a villain, so that, in the end, only the two of them would remain. According to her, since he was trying to be a good person, she was forced to take more drastic measures. Even so, to Anne, it was all worth it. In the end, she would have his love completely. It was in that moment that the protagonist realized Anne, the maid who had seemed so gentle, was actually completely insane. Behind that sweet appearance, she hid an obsessed and unbalanced mind. Moon then woke up again. He didn't know if that had just been a nightmare, a vision of the future, or some kind of mystical warning, but the pain he still felt in his body made everything more confusing. To make matters worse, the book reactivated. Words began to appear on the pages by themselves, saying that he should not change his own fate. That made everything even more complicated in his mind. If those words were right, then maybe the path to salvation lay in following the true ending of the original story. But that could also lead him to total destruction. After all, at the end of the novel, the character Moon Campbell didn't die. He just ended up as a beggar in the streets, which, while sad, at least meant staying alive. For someone who had already been reborn once, that was already a victory. Besides, Moon no longer saw anything admirable in that aristocratic world that so fascinated the readers of the novel. In his view, the aristocracy was just a group of privileged people sustained by the effort of the poor. But his opinion changed almost instantly when he went down for breakfast. In front of him was a feast worthy of royalty. Dozens of colorful and fragrant dishes filled the table, and he was amazed by the abundance of delicious food. It was in that moment he realized he might already be getting corrupted by the pleasures of nobility. Seated at the table with him were Noyes Campbell, his mother, and Leopold Lon Campbell, his father. During the meal, the atmosphere was calm, and it became clear that both of them loved him deeply. They were kind and gentle people who genuinely cared for him. However, the conversation between the two soon took a serious turn. They were discussing whether or not they should hand Moon over to someone named Celia. Upon hearing that name, the protagonist immediately remembered who she was. Celia was the third princess of the Empire, and the girl that, in the original story, he had tried to drug during the coming-of-age ceremony. That was the fatal mistake that destroyed the character's reputation. Celia was a well-known figure among the novel's readers. Although she seemed cold on the outside, she was a good person on the inside. That duality made many fans fall in love with her, not to mention her striking beauty. As he had realized from the beginning, the Campbell family was made up of good people. Both Noyes, Moon's mother, and Leopold Lon Campbell, his father, were calm, affectionate, and truly concerned for their son's well-being. And that made everything even sadder, because Moon Campbell's original fate, as the protagonist remembered from the novel, was to drag the entire family into ruin. It wasn't just him who would fall. Even his parents would be destroyed by the consequences of his actions. Now inhabiting Moon's body, the protagonist knew he had to find a way to change everything, not just for himself, but also to save those around him. The first thing he needed to deal with was what would happen at the banquet the next day. From what he remembered, Moon hadn't been exiled for directly attacking the princess, but because the princess's father was involved in a treasonous crime, and the blame had fallen on the Campbell family as scapegoats. Because of that, the protagonist's immediate goal became clear. He had to find a way to save his new family, even if it cost him his own life. As he walked through the halls of the mansion, he thought about how to deal with the royal family. Defeating someone like Celia, a brilliant and talented mage, wouldn't be possible with a common potion or a simple trick. He would have to think differently. And more urgently, he needed to find the evidence that would be used to incriminate the Campbells. If he could anticipate that move, maybe he had a chance to stop everything. While lost in thought, he accidentally bumped into a maid. As soon as she saw him, the young woman went into a complete panic. She apologized over and over, trembling with fear, and said she wasn't paying attention to where she was going. When she noticed she had slightly dirtied Moon's clothes, she panicked even more, thinking she would be punished, fired, or even tortured. That made it very clear what kind of image the former Moon had left among the staff. Seeing the situation, the protagonist calmly approached her and gave her a hug. As he did, he noticed the girl had a fever. She tried to downplay it, saying there was no choice. The banquet was the next day, and since they were short-staffed, she had to keep working even while sick. The young woman then introduced herself. Her name was Noel. At that moment, Anne, who still seemed like nothing more than a loyal maid, appeared and found the scene strange. She asked what was going on, and the protagonist explained that Noel was sick and needed to rest. Anne tried to justify that they were already short on staff, and if one person missed work, the rest of the team would be overwhelmed. But the new Moon was firm. He said that anyone who was sick should be allowed to rest, and that they should hire outside help, even if temporarily. On the day of the banquet, banquet, he didn't want to take any risks and certainly didn't want important guests being served by someone with a fever. After he left, Noel was left confused by the sudden change. The young master, who used to be arrogant and cruel, was now being kind? Meanwhile, Anne said she would follow his orders. But internally, she reflected in silence. Something had changed too much in that boy, and maybe the plan she had been carrying inside her would need to be put into action earlier than expected. Meanwhile, Moon continued his search for a solution. Considering that a simple potion wouldn't be enough to defeat someone like Celia, he knew there was only one place where he might find something truly out of the ordinary. There was a secret location in the duchy, a space reserved only for the most influential nobles, where high-level and illegal items circulated. It was the black market, and according to what he knew from the original story, Moon himself had privileged access to that exclusive place, full of rules, secrets, and dangers. Moon used the excuse that he was going out to buy silverware and jewelry for his parents. The next day, he left the house and headed into the alleys of the duchy's slums. There, he discreetly entered the sewers and, using a VIP credential, quickly gained access to the duchy's hidden black market. This hidden market offered everything: rare ingredients, potions, artificial magical crossbows, and even slaves. However, that day, Moon wasn't looking for any of that. He went straight to one of the shops, where he found a cheerful receptionist wearing a mask and a hood with cat ears. Without wasting time, Moon explained that he needed a special potion, one that was colorless, odorless, and specifically made for mages. The receptionist commented that nobles nowadays had very peculiar tastes, but it wasn't her job to judge. So she tried to offer other related products, like slaves, magic stones, and various other items. Moon, who wasn't in the mood for conversation, responded bluntly that if she didn't have the potion he was looking for, he would go to another shop. Upon hearing that, the receptionist asked him to wait a moment, since it was a rare potion and she would need to search for it in the storage. While she was in the back of the shop, the narration made it clear that, for some reason, the author wanted to show certain details about the character, but preferred to avoid direct commentary. Still, Moon was not paying attention to that. He was thinking about how, in the future, when his fate collapsed and he ended up as a beggar, perhaps a connection with that girl could make his life less bitter. While he was lost in these thoughts, another girl appeared suddenly. Just like him, she went straight to the point and asked for a powerful potion against mages, one that would leave no traces. The receptionist accepted the request without hesitation. After all, money was coming in. But inside, she wondered why the two customers that day were making such similar requests. Moon was also curious about why the girl wanted that kind of potion, but chose not to get involved. He simply felt sorry for whoever her target was. The potion itself had a striking appearance, but according to the receptionist, that was just aesthetics. If mixed with red wine or water, it would completely lose its color, smell, and taste. Its effect was so strong that with just one drop it could knock out an elephant for 3 straight hours. If any customer wanted to test the potion, they could do so right there. However, anyone who passed out would have to pay $5,000 per hour slept, which was not cheap. Neither of the two customers wanted to take the risk. The price of the potion was $130,000 in local currency. Upon hearing that, the girl in the black hood declared she had no money, but offered information of equivalent value. The receptionist read the contents of the envelope she handed over, and, surprised, asked if it was really true. The girl replied that she should analyze it herself with her own ability. Since the customer was in a hurry, the receptionist decided to accept the trade, stating that the information was indeed worth the $130,000. With that settled, the girl left. As for Moon, since he had enough money, he paid in cash. The receptionist was pleased with the payment and, as a courtesy, gave him an extra potion as a bonus. It was a pink potion that, according to her, paired well with the red one. The effects of the combination, however, were better left unmentioned. Taking the opportunity, Moon asked how much it would cost to learn what information the other girl had provided. The receptionist, excited by the interest, replied that she could sell it to him for a cheap price, $900,000. The curious thing was that, moments earlier, she had accepted that same information for only $130,000. This made it seem like her negotiation skills might not be the best. Of course, faced with that situation, Moon simply turned his back and left. Meanwhile, still inside the shop, the receptionist commented that the information she had received was quite valuable. Summarizing the contents, it was the announcement of the coming-of-age ceremony of the young master of the Campbell family. During this event, the third princess of the empire would be present, and it seemed that the staff organizing the event was short on workers. That meant anyone wanting to attend the party could simply take advantage of that opportunity. Moreover, from what the black-haired boy remembered, the second prince never had a good relationship with his own sister. Meanwhile, Duke Raymond, another guest at the party, had always clashed with the Grand Duke of the Campbell household. Observing all these details, the black-haired receptionist realized that the girl who had just bought the potion was solving two problems at once. The following night, the Campbell palace was already in celebration. Nobles from across the empire presented their daughters and families to the Duke, as etiquette demanded. However, Moon was not exactly being well received by the ladies present. The daughter of a marquis Lee, who stood before him, looked at him with some disdain, and the same was true for several other women. This made it clear that the former owner of Moon's body had not left a good impression. While Moon reflected on this, he was interrupted by Leopold, who congratulated him. He said that he had been worried before, but now he saw no reason to be, since Moon was the center of the ceremony. After that night, he would no longer be a child and would become a man, so he should feel proud. At that moment, a new announcement was made. Everyone was to welcome the third in line to the throne of the Leopold Empire, known as the White and Pure Maiden, blessed by the goddess of ice and snow. It was the third princess of the empire, Celia. Since he was the protagonist of the event, Moon had to present himself to the princess. He complimented her, saying she looked lovely that evening, and Celia received the comment naturally, even a bit surprised by his politeness. Just from the way she carried herself, it was easy to understand why so many people were fascinated by her. Even so, Moon found her behavior curious, as if she had not expected him to have any manners. He quickly realized that, in her mind, he was someone rude and without any control over his tongue. Celia confirmed that thought, saying that was exactly how she saw him. After that brief exchange of words, Moon suggested that she take a moment to rest, since she had traveled quite a bit. While Celia continued greeting the other nobles, she silently wondered why Moon was acting so polite. Meanwhile, Moon began hearing rumors about the arrival of an illegitimate daughter. It was said that Count Bugard had passed the heir title to her. In the end, even though she was an illegitimate child, the girl had become part of the nobility. The girl they were talking about was Ariel Bugard, the original protagonist of that world. Regardless, Ariel approached to introduce herself to the monster of the ceremony, but was suddenly interrupted by a chubby boy with glasses who began attacking her verbally, saying she should not even be there. Before he could keep spouting nonsense, Moon stepped in and silenced him. Then he turned to Ariel and apologized, leaving her completely confused. She had expected Moon to insult her, call her illegitimate, or even a dog, but instead he did the exact opposite. While Ariel was still processing that, a girl named Leah was placed beside her. The problem was that, when Moon tried to approach Leah, Ariel got defensive, slapped his hand away, and made it clear she was only there because of Moon's father. She said she did not care what did or did not happen to him. If he was going to do anything, he should keep his hands far away from Leah. After that statement, she left, and Moon once again realized how awful his reputation was. Even so, after that night, their paths would no longer cross. He planned to avoid any contact with her at all costs. Sometime later, under the supervision of his parents, Moon officially delivered his coming-of-age speech at 18, in front of all the nobles of the empire. From that day on, he would become the official heir to the Campbell family, even though he knew the title would not last long. After the speech, it was time to take action, and that meant approaching Celia. As soon as he found her, he apologized for the rude way he had acted when they first met. To show sincerity, he asked if he could have the honor of inviting her to dance. At first, Celia thought about refusing, but since it was his coming-of-age celebration, there was no real reason to reject him. As they started dancing, all eyes turned to them. While they danced, Celia commented that he danced well and seemed to have changed a lot. Moon then asked if she thought he was more like a noble now. Celia replied not exactly. What had changed was the way he treated people. She clearly remembered a party at a viscount's house, where he had approached a girl and said she should feel happy, because the young master had shown mercy and given her the right to dance with him. Remembering that, Moon was deeply embarrassed and apologized again for that behavior. But getting straight to the point, the real reason Moon had invited Celia to dance was because he wanted to speak with her privately after the party. Celia reacted awkwardly, reminding him that the two of them were engaged, but that she could not go to his room since it would be inappropriate. Moon then explained that he fully understood the boundaries. What he wanted was just to talk about their relationship. She did not quite understand at first, so he explained more clearly. He said he knew she did not like him and that their engagement had been arranged by the emperor to maintain the alliance between the royal family and the Campbell ducal house. If the royal family canceled the engagement, it would damage their own reputation. That was why Moon wanted to talk to her, because maybe if they worked together, they could find a better solution to that situation. Celia remarked that, considering everything, it truly was a matter only she and Moon should resolve. Upon hearing that, Moon was satisfied because she had taken the bait he needed. She then asked where his room was, since she saw no reason to wait until the end of the party. She wanted to settle everything as quickly as possible. As the two walked through the corridors toward the room, a few maids observed from a distance and suspiciously commented that the young master had already fallen into his own trap. According to them, it was time to act. Inside the room, Moon offered red wine to the princess, but Celia immediately refused. She said she would not accept any kind of alcoholic drink that night. That was already a big problem for Moon, because in the original story, it was never clear how he had given the potion potion to the princess. Now he needed to improvise. Instead of insisting on drinks, he asked if she wanted anything specific, and Celia replied she preferred coffee. However, Moon said he only had black tea or red wine, since due to a few setbacks, those were the only things available that night. With no better option, Celia accepted the black tea. A little too excited, Moon began preparing the tea, but his enthusiasm made Celia suspicious. Meanwhile, he discreetly mixed a red potion into the drink. He did not use the pink potion because he did not know what its exact effect would be. But in the middle of the preparation, Celia suddenly approached. The surprise made Moon accidentally spill both potions, which ended up falling into each of the cups. In case it was not clear yet, the pink potion was an aphrodisiac. Realizing the mistake, Moon panicked. That potion was rare, and he had planned to save it for the future, even thinking of diluting it into 10,000 smaller vials to sell if he ever ended up as a beggar. But now, it had been wasted. Since Celia was in a hurry to drink the tea, Moon brought it to her. When she saw the reddish color of the drink, she found it odd and asked the reason. He made up a story saying it was because of an herb called gran, and that was why the tea was known as Gran Red Cloak. Even so, she did not fully trust him and asked him to drink it first. Moon, trying to stay calm, said he would do it without any problem, claiming he would never poison Her Highness's cup. But just as he was about to drink, Celia took his cup instead, saying that since his was not red, she would rather drink that one. Right after taking a single sip, she collapsed to the floor and lost consciousness. That was expected, since both cups had been contaminated by the potions. In the original story of the second novel, it was at this point that the protagonist appeared. To ensure everything would go exactly as in the plot of the book, Moon discreetly adjusted the princess's clothes, leaving parts of her body exposed, and also removed part of his own clothing. According to the story's logic, all he had to do now was wait for the protagonist's arrival, and the rest would follow as planned. The problem was that more than half an hour had passed, and the supposed protagonist still had not shown up. Moon began searching for answers, trying to remember what happened in the original scene. From what he recalled, Ariel's clothes had been stained by a maid who was gravely ill. Because of that, she had gone to the bathroom to clean herself and ended up finding Moon at the exact moment he was about to do something to the princess. But remembering that sick maid, Moon wondered if perhaps she was Noel. That raised the possibility that the original story was already starting to change. While Moon was still trying to think of a way to keep the plot on track, Celia suddenly woke up and threw him to the floor. That left him completely desperate. He tried to come up with some excuse to justify the situation, but everything was happening too fast. The mood between the two began to heat up. Celia's expression showed clear intentions, and Moon, no matter how hard he tried to control himself, could not react. She had frozen his arms and legs, saying his body was perfect, exactly the type she desired. She even kissed him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, Ariel's dress had gotten dirty. Unlike the original story, the one who spilled something on her this time was Leah. On her way to the bathroom to clean herself, Ariel encountered Anne, who stopped her and said that area of the mansion was restricted, and she could not go through. Ariel explained she was just looking for a bathroom to clean up, so Anne resolved the situation using magic to restore the dress. That surprised Ariel, since even the maids in that mansion used magic so naturally. Anne commented that it was nothing, and then mentioned that during the banquet, there would be a limited quantity of psikshi pie, which made Ariel instantly happy. She ran off, leaving Anne behind. On her way back, Ariel began thinking about that maid. There was something strange about her, a scent of blood, as if she were not just an ordinary servant. She also noticed other hidden presences around her, but decided to ignore them, because everything was within the Duke's mansion and had nothing to do with her. Besides, she trusted that the third princess was a genius and would never be subdued by a blonde playboy. For Ariel, nothing mattered more than the promise of the psikshi pie. Meanwhile, on the side of the mysterious maids, it became clear that Ariel was objective number 9 of a mission. The 9th member of their group had been killed by Ariel, which caused a partial failure. Even so, the main plan was still in progress. It was a meticulous operation, planned by someone called Lionheart King, also known as Ron Campbell. The only threats to their success now would be the appearance of Moon or Celia. One of the maids commented that perhaps they still had a little more time, since the two were busy. They even joked that maybe they were in a special rally. In the end, nothing truly happened between Moon and Celia. He had managed to control himself and keep his honor. If he had done anything, the situation would have become infinitely worse. However, even without committing any direct act, the fact that he had drugged Celia was enough to seal his fate. And this time, his death would come at the hands of the princess herself. Moon still tried to explain, but Celia was consumed by rage. He knew he needed needed to choose his final words wisely. He began by saying that he had once had a true love before him but did not know how to value it. He only realized it when he lost it. He asked for a second chance, but Celia refused. For her, it did not make sense that a sincere feeling could be so dirty. If he truly liked her, he should have won her over with character, strength, and sincerity, like a real man, not with cheap tricks and potions. Moon insisted, saying he had no choice, that he did not know what to do. But before he could continue, someone knocked on the door. Celia tried to send away whoever it was, but Moon explained that the room was soundproof and that if they were insisting, it was because they really needed to say something important. He would have to open the door. But before that, he needed to get dressed, or things would become even worse. In the end, Moon realized he had not escaped death, only delayed it. Because even without going through with anything, he had still drugged the princess. And now she knew it. The only thing Moon could think about now was his own death. He might be killed by Celia, hanged in a public square by some king, or dismembered by a stranger inside a dungeon in some dream. And on top of everything, he still wondered why the protagonist had only decided to show up now so late. However, the one knocking on the door was not the protagonist. It was only a maid, saying she had brought some snacks that the lady had ordered for them. But the moment the maid entered the room, Moon noticed that he did not recognize her. The girl explained that she had been chosen the day before to work in the Duke's mansion, so it was normal for him not to know who she was. But there was a problem. They did not have enough uniforms for all the employees, so technically the new ones should not be wearing servant clothing. Because of that, it was clear that hiding the truth was pointless. The girl suddenly rushed forward, and Moon understood at once that she was an assassin. Unable to move or fight, he shouted Celia's name, and she quickly stood up and blocked the attack with her sword. She already suspected that the assassin had been sent by her own brother. The assassin, of course, did not confirm the client's name, saying it was confidential. But she did guarantee one thing: Celia would die that night. Right after that, several spells were cast at Celia, and the assassin even said it would be impossible for her to leave alive. However, she had greatly underestimated the princess. Suddenly, Celia appeared with an ice lance that she created herself and almost killed the woman with a single strike. Meanwhile, Moon, desperate and completely powerless, tried to escape the chaos. But since the maid had locked the door when she entered, he had no choice but to hide behind a table. As he hid, he wondered how that assassin had managed to enter. He remembered that he had ordered the hiring of new staff for the banquet, since the previous number of employees was not enough. He began to suspect that someone had infiltrated an assassin into the Duke's castle. There was no point in thinking too much about it now. He needed to focus on surviving. Celia continued fighting the assassin, and although she had a chance of winning, Moon knew that it would not change his fate. Even if she survived, he would likely end up dead either way. While all this was happening, Celia began provoking the assassin, praising her skills and showing that she knew there was another mage outside the room, sealing the place so no one would know what was happening inside. The assassin, in turn, said she had faced geniuses before and had even killed some of them, but she admitted that, compared to Celia, all the others seemed like mere children. Celia was a true monster. Given the situation, Celia asked the assassin who was behind the attack. Perhaps if she talked, she would get a quicker and less painful death. But as always, such threats hardly made sense. After all, if you are going to die anyway, why say anything? And that was exactly the choice the assassin made. She preferred to say nothing. Meanwhile, the other accomplice, who was outside, warned her partner to hurry. The magic barrier around the room would not last much longer. The assassin, hearing the warning, pulled out a red vial and began a ritual. Celia, with her experience, quickly recognized it as a summoning ritual directed to the cursed god. She tried to stop it, but failed. The energy impact threw Celia across the room, and the assassin had all her wounds healed. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the assassin launched her attack. Celia defended herself the best she could, even using a small knife that Moon had once used to cut his own finger. With it, she managed to counter the strike. But this time, it was Celia who was seriously injured. Without strength to continue resisting, she was thrown once more against the wall. The situation kept getting worse. The assassin, now in a hurry to finish the job, aimed straight at Celia's head. However, the blow did not land. There was blood everywhere, but it was not Celia's, it was Moon's. For some reason, he had thrown himself in front of her and taken the hit to his chest. Celia, in shock, asked what he was doing there. Going back a little in time to understand why he did that, it was revealed that Anne, the maid who created the magical barrier, had informed him that the only target was Celia. That meant Moon could have escaped safely if he wanted. The way out was open before him. Even so, Moon thought it would be disgraceful to let Celia die like that. So, without a second thought, he jumped in front of the dagger and asked her to kill the assassin right away. And that was exactly what Celia did with a single precise movement. As Moon drowned in his own blood, Celia explained that the other woman, the one responsible for the barrier, had fled. There was nothing she could do to stop it anymore. But setting that aside, what she really wanted to know was why Moon had tried to save her. From his point of view, everything made sense. If he died there, all the shame he had brought to his family would disappear with him. After all, he was the one who had made all the mistakes. With his death, Celia would no longer have any reason to go after the Campbells. However, Celia said that none of that mattered anymore, because in that moment, he had done exactly what she had said earlier. If he really was a man, he should prove it through his actions. And now he was acting like a real man, just as she had asked. Even so, she told him that he was on the brink of death and should say his final words so she could deliver them to his parents. And Moon's last words were exactly what everyone expected. He sincerely apologized to Celia and confessed that he truly liked her. After that, his body gave in and he died. Despite everything, even though the words came from someone she had hated so much, Celia was moved. She then used her magic and declared that she would not accept those apologies. If he truly wanted to atone for his sins, then he should live. That was why she decided to save him. Meanwhile, in the void between life and death, Moon reflected, even if he had died in the end, at least he had made the right choice. He had acted with dignity. Compared to the shameful life he had led up until that point, his death had been a noble act. He had died for someone he loved. And let's be honest, if he had to say goodbye, dying in the arms of a beauty like Celia was not the worst way to go. The problem is that our protagonist, Moon, is so unlucky that not even death gives him peace. That mysterious book from before showed a strange progression of the story Moon had followed, with confusing records that were difficult to understand at first glance. Even so, one thing was clear. The book asked him to keep up the good work. It was at that moment that he was sucked into the book, which meant yes, he would not get a peaceful rest. He would probably return to the same hell he had been living in, or something close to it, since so far, nothing truly bad had actually happened. Meanwhile, in reality, more specifically in the sewers beneath the Campbell estate, the maid who had fled was trying to escape as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, she took too long. She ended up running into Lon, Moon's father, who immediately demanded to know what had happened to his son. And of course, he listened to everything, not missing a single detail. Sometime later, Moon regained consciousness. The first person he saw was Anne, who asked if her young master was all right, and said that if he was not, she would call a doctor to examine him. Moon, however, simply asked to go to the bathroom. When he tried to get up, he realized his legs were too weak. But that was not such a big problem because beside the bed, there was a urinal. That yellow container used to urinate without having to move. While he was unconscious, Anne had already prepared everything to help him, knowing that he could not leave the bed. She was even willing to pull down his pants to help him with his needs. But now that he was awake, he naturally refused immediately. Anne understood the message, but instead of helping him walk, she simply picked him up in her arms like he was a princess. To make matters worse for his reputation, she carried him like that right in front of several maids who were standing by the door. And once they arrived at the bathroom, Anne even offered to help him inside. But Moon refused again, embarrassed. Later, back in the bedroom, he asked how long he had been asleep. Anne replied that 3 days had passed. He had survived thanks to Princess Celia, who, after all that chaos, called the royal family's mages and healers to treat him. However, due to the severe blood loss, his brain lacked oxygen, and that caused the weakness in his body. Taking the opportunity, Moon, already a bit suspicious, asked whether Celia had said anything. Anne answered no, or rather, she actually had said something to the king. That immediately startled Moon. But in fact, what she had said was very different from what he imagined. What actually happened was this. Celia told the king that she had been attacked by assassins and that afterward, Moon had gone to the black market and wiped out everyone involved with those criminals. As for the assassin who had met with Moon's father, she was captured and tortured. They eventually extracted the information that several nobles were involved in the plot. This enraged the king and made him start suspecting everyone. He launched a full investigation, a thorough sweep among the nobles. Fortunately, the Campbell family was excluded from that investigation. Most likely, Celia had said something to protect his family. Hearing this, Moon felt relieved. In the end, everything had turned out fine. Even so, Anne noticed that he seemed a bit nervous. Had something inappropriate happened between him and Celia? The tension in the air was obvious, and the situation felt suspicious. Moon, trying to dodge the subject, recalled that rather intense moment, but he quickly made up an excuse, saying he had just spilled a teacup and that nothing serious had happened. However, both he and Anne knew that something had happened, or almost happened. Still, she decided to drop the subject. Right after that, it was time for Moon to take his medicine. With the very first spoonful, he threw everything up. Anne explained that it was not exactly medicine, but rather a special supplement meant to boost blood production, since he had lost so much. Meanwhile, the maids outside the door started to find his behavior strange. After all, the last time Moon had fallen ill, he was so cruel that if he refused to take a medicine, he would whip the servants. Now, seeing him obedient and even hesitant to complain was just too weird. Because he was so disgusted by that bitter liquid, the maids thought that only his mother would be able to force him to take it. But when Moon heard the suggestion, he immediately told them not to call anyone and downed the medicine all at once. The moment he did, it all came right back up. The reason, according to Anne, who had completely forgotten to explain it earlier, was that taking the full dose at once would cause an immediate side effect. including nausea and vomiting. No one knew whether she truly forgot these important details or did it on purpose. To make it worse, Anne said he still needed to take 2 more doses to fully recover. That alone was enough to make Moon feel completely hopeless. Trying to ease the situation, Anne prepared a cup of tea and a slice of cake to help soften the bitter taste. Moved by the gesture, Moon commented that he would later talk to his parents about increasing Anne's salary, but she politely refused. Before leaving the room, Moon curiously asked how Anne had managed to make him take that medicine while he was unconscious. Looking around, he saw no tubes, syringes, or any other equipment that could have been used to force it down. How on earth had she done it? Anne, a little embarrassed, replied that it had been simple. Knowing he could not stand anything bitter, she had placed a lot of sugar in his mouth. After thinking for a moment, Moon understood what that meant. She had kissed him to help the medicine go down. That made him turn completely red, realizing that he had lost his first kiss because of a medicine. Or at least, he thought it was his first, until he remembered that his real first kiss had actually been with Celia, not Anne. Speaking of which, Anne mentioned that there was a letter from the royal family on top of his bookshelf. He immediately went to check, already assuming it was from Celia, and indeed it was. The message said that she now considered him only half a man, not even a complete one. Still, she acknowledged that he had managed to prevent a tragic ending. Later that evening, during dinner, Moon's mother was in a state of panic. She said that if anything had happened to her daughter, she would never be able to live in peace again. Moon, trying to calm her, replied that he was perfectly fine. Except for the scar he had received, everything was all right. Speaking of the scar, Moon's father, Lon, accepted the mark without any issue, saying that scars were a man's medals. Also during dinner, Lon mentioned that according to the reports, there had been 3 assassins infiltrated in the mansion. One of them had tried to escape through the sewers, but was captured and interrogated. Of course, getting information out of him had not been easy. But with what they managed to uncover, it became clear that the assassins were professional mercenaries from the black market. Moreover, they were worshippers of a dark entity known as the Fallen King. According to the Royal Guard's intelligence, this criminal organization had been committing crimes for years in exchange for money. If someone paid enough, they were even capable of killing their own father. This was a problem that would no longer affect Moon since Lon had wiped out the entire black market. That made Moon a little uneasy, but his mother began praising Lon, saying he was incredibly strong, a duke who had won countless wars. Putting the praise aside, Moon asked if they had managed to discover anything else. Lon replied that although they had captured some members of the group, all of them were under a curse. Whenever they tried to say the name of the true mastermind, their bodies would catch fire and completely evaporate. Because of that, they were unable to obtain any solid clues, which left the king furious. In the end, they destroyed the entire black market of Belland, but found no information about the true person behind it all. And since the data regarding this figure was protected at a national level, everything pointed to the mastermind being a powerful noble. That was why the king had started investigating the aristocracy. Hearing all this, Moon remembered that something very similar had happened in the original novel. The black market was also destroyed. But in the story, it all started when someone placed a bounty on the head of the king's favorite. That infuriated the monarch, and he ordered the massacre of everyone involved. The hunt was so intense that it lasted 3 months. There was so much death that the sewers of Belland, where the black market was located, became soaked in blood. The event became known as the River of Blood. In the original story, this event was extremely important for the growth of Ariel, who was the protagonist. She had been taking part in an illegal auction and ended up caught in the conflict between the royal knights and the underworld. Despite almost dying several times, Ariel managed to survive and significantly increase her power. This event marked her transition from an ordinary student to the savior of the world. The problem was that Moon had ended up triggering all of it early. That part of the story was supposed to happen 2 years later, but he had set the events in motion in just 2 days. With that, he realized he had completely disrupted the flow of the original narrative. Later, back in his room, Moon reflected that, theoretically, he was supposed to be resting. His parents had asked for it, but now that he had literally destroyed the entire plot of the original story, he could no longer afford such luxury. Since he could no longer rely on the novel's script, he would need to start setting new goals on his own. Among those goals were surviving, avoiding the prison and torture ending he had seen happen to Anne, getting stronger, and not trusting the Black Book. However, when he remembered that he had recently witnessed another alternate ending, everything seemed even more confusing. That led him to give up on most goals for the time being, as he didn't even know what triggered each possible outcome. The lack of information left him frustrated and confused. Lying in bed, he came to a conclusion. He urgently needed to get stronger. And as the son of a duke, he had access to all the necessary resources. But reality was more complicated. The most powerful characters in the story were always around the protagonist, and Moon, in the original timeline, had barely learned a light spell during his time at the Magic Academy, a practically useless spell. Even so, he realized that his current physical condition was not that bad. If he trained hard, maybe he could reach the first level. According to the Academy's teachings, there were 5 main levels for each of the 3 traditional classes: Mage, Priest, and Warrior. In addition, there was a higher level that went far beyond the known world's understanding. However, even if he reached level 5 through effort and dedication, it would not be enough against Ariel and Celia, who had been chosen by the gods. These blessed individuals stood above the traditional classes and were walking cheats. For example, Celia had received the blessing of the goddess of ice, and since childhood was able to control ice magic as if it were natural. Simple spells for her would require a regular priest to perform complex rituals. Ariel was even more absurd. As far as Moon remembered from the novel, she had been chosen by 10 different gods. Later in the story, all she had to do was reach out her hand, and one of them would appear to help her. Even at the beginning of the narrative, she was already physically stronger than Moon, not to mention the countless rare items she carried and the absurd luck that always favored her. Faced with all of this, it became clear to him what his immediate goal should be: to reach a high level as quickly as possible, just to be able to defend himself from a possible attack by Ariel. Still, he was not at a total disadvantage. He had one card up his sleeve, the Black Book. When he first summoned it, a shadow rose from the ground and attacked his classmates, showing that the artifact was anything but friendly. Right after that, some words began to appear on the book's pages. They described everything Moon had done so far as if he were reading the story of a protagonist. Among those texts, some words in red caught his attention, suggesting they might be information about the future. However, before he could understand better, the book sucked Moon's body inside it. When he came to, he was already in a completely different dungeon. It was not the same prison where he had been held before. It was a new place, and much stranger. Maybe that strange place was actually a space inside the Black Book. As he tried to understand what was happening, Moon heard a voice saying the name of a skill, Shadow Step, and when he realized it, he was facing the same assassin who had previously almost killed Celia. Inside that book world, he was completely defeated by her and ended up dying. That's when he woke up, back in reality, as if he had just had a nightmare, gathering the few pieces of information he had managed to absorb. Looking at the Black Book, he noticed it had recorded some skills in which Moon now had progress to learn. Coincidentally, they were exactly the same techniques the assassin had used against him. That was when he understood the true function of the book. From that moment on, the dangers that appeared would not only serve to threaten him, but would become opportunities for growth. Instead of weakening him, those traps would make him even stronger. Over time, he began running some tests and discovered that the flow of time inside the book was the same as in the real world. And even if he barely lasted 3 seconds inside before dying, each attempt still granted him some understanding or mastery of the abilities he had seen. This confirmed that the Black Book was absurdly powerful, even if it paradoxically also tried to kill him. Despite that, the fact that Moon could learn techniques just by observing his enemies was an impressive advantage. The dagger technique, combined with the assassin's shadow step, was elegant and powerful. Faced with that, he began to wonder if, in a possible confrontation with Ariel, he could also copy some ability from her. But he decided to leave that question for the future, since he still had much to train. In practice, that training felt more like a torture session. He was beaten, stabbed, and cut in every possible way. While he was going through all that, Anne entered the room, saying it was time to deliver the medicine to her young master. Seeing him sleeping in a strange way, wrapped in blankets like he was inside an igloo, she found it very cute, so she just left the medicine on the table and quietly left. Right after, Moon came out of the pile of blankets complaining, still upset for having been killed by the assassin the last time he entered the book. He swore that next time would be different and that he would defeat her. The next day, he trained so much that his body collapsed. The wounds caused inside the book did not manifest physically, but the pain and mental trauma were real. He tried to discover some kind of loophole in the system to avoid feeling pain upon dying, but he failed. With every death, the suffering was inevitable. Even so, he felt satisfied with the results of that night's effort. He managed to reach 35% mastery in dagger combat and 11% in the shadow step technique, which left him extremely excited. All that suffering, after all, had not been in vain. The first thing he decided to test was precisely the shadow step, and it worked. However, he barely had time to celebrate because he fell to the ground with a sharp pain in his foot after executing the technique. He questioned the intense pain and then remembered that shadow step was a veteran-level skill. Since he was still just a beginner, he couldn't perform it properly. In simple terms, for anyone who still hadn't understood, the problem was obvious. Moon was far too weak to master the shadow step technique. Because of that, he realized that he urgently needed a master to grow stronger. The problem was that, in the school he was going to, there were only mages. There were no warriors there because magic was considered much more useful than swords, as people always said. Even so, if he were to look for a warrior to train him, he already had one right under his own roof. His father was none other than the strongest man in the world. He was known as the Heart of Warriors, someone who had once faced 1,000 men alone in battle. To understand just how powerful he was, one only had to look at his history. At 15, he was already serving as the Crown Prince's guard. At 20, he helped that prince become king. At 25, he became the military leader of the entire empire. He defended the borders in battles that shook the continent, striking fear into neighboring kingdoms. At 32, he was officially recognized with the title of Lionheart, being the only duke in history to achieve that rank purely through military merit. The man was simply a monster in combat. It was strange to think that even with such a legendary father, Moon had still ruined himself in the original story. While he was reflecting on that, Anne showed up with a message. His father was calling him. That ended up speeding things up for him. As they walked to where Leopold was, some maids called Anne the head maid. This made Moon ask if she had been promoted. She explained that the former head maid had stepped down from her position, taking responsibility for everything that had happened to him. That news made Moon a bit sad, since he knew his father must have been even more shaken. The former head maid was like an older sister and a second mother to him. Anne, however, reassured him by saying that the woman had not left the family, only the position. Sometime later, when they reached Leopold, Moon's mother, named Noise, hugged him tightly, full of longing. But right after the reunion, he received two important pieces of news. The first was that he would have a new brother or sister. The second, more serious, was that his father would have to return to the war front. Since Moon's classes would start the following month, Noise would end up staying home alone. Because of that, Leopold decided to send her to the Campbell family's fief, a more distant and peaceful region. She would go with the maids so she could have a peaceful pregnancy, accompanied also by Faye, the former head maid who was Leopold's most trusted person. Back to the main topic, Moon asked if his father really needed to leave, since there were other dukes in the empire capable of leading troops. But Leopold explained that the situation was critical. The attacks were more intense than those from 10 years ago, and according to the information received, it was almost certain that he would have to spend 3 consecutive years on the front lines. The ones responsible for the attacks were the so-called demons of the depths, enemies that Moon knew well thanks to the original story. These 3 years of battles actually marked the beginning of Ariel's own salvation journey. The problem was that this completely ruined Moon's plans, since he wanted to use this period to train and rise as someone powerful in everyone's eyes. Sometime later, with the carriages prepared for departure, Leopold tried to console Noise, who was crying a lot. And as he got ready to leave, looking at his son, the Duke said some proud words. He stated that Moon was a true man for putting himself in front of the princess, and that his blood was worthy of the Campbells. That made it clear that, despite everything, Moon still had a chance to live up to the family name. Besides all that, Leopold was also known as the sharpest sword in the empire, and one day, the men of the Campbell family would have to face the battlefield themselves. The difference was that, unlike Leopold, who had to climb from nothing all on his own, Moon already had a solid foundation. Therefore, his journey to the top should be much easier. Putting all the formality aside and cutting the heroic speech, Leopold changed the tone of the conversation and began asking Moon if he, by any chance, liked Anne. Moon replied that, between liking and not liking, he did like her. Leopold then explained that he had known Anne since she was a child, and already knew that the type of relationship she wanted with Moon was very different from a typical master and servant bond. If Moon wanted something more with her, he should act while there was still time. He also mentioned that their family had few members, partly because Leopold was almost never home. But to Moon, that conversation didn't make much sense, since, theoretically, he was engaged to Celia. However, Leopold revealed that this supposed engagement was actually an empty promise. The Emperor's true intention was to use the Campbell family as a political support base for the princess, and to balance the power with the Crown Prince. If Celia truly wanted to marry Moon, all she had to do was name him as her official husband. None of it was formal or binding. Summing up the whole conversation, Leopold declared that he would spend 3 years at the front, and when he returned, he wanted to have a grandchild in his arms. For him, that was an order as head of the family. That left Moon completely confused. Out of nowhere, the old man wanted him to have a child in 3 years. Even though the deadline was long, it was still a totally unexpected demand. And of all the possible women, did it have to be Anne? Anyway, after his parents left, Anne showed up asking what he had discussed with his father, as she had heard her name mentioned. She wanted to know if there was something she needed to do. Moon, a bit impatient, simply replied that his father wanted the two of them to expand the Campbell bloodline. Then he said she didn't have to take that joke seriously because her role now was just that of a maid, and that in the end, each of them would go their own way. He even commented that if one day she found someone she truly loved, he himself would help with the dowry, so that she could show her future husband that she came from a respectable household. Therefore, she should chase her own happiness with courage, because her young master and the entire Campbell family would always be ready to support her. After saying all that, Moon felt very proud of himself. He had read so many novels over the years that now he could act like a kind and understanding master. In his head, Anne was probably deeply moved, maybe even crying with joy. And in fact, she was crying, but out of anger. She clenched her fist so tightly that it began to bleed, saying that her young master had changed too much. That's why she couldn't wait any longer. That night would be the night. Later that night, Moon was alone in the mansion's library. Since he couldn't train with his father, he decided to continue training on his own by reading the books available in the house. He also knew that he needed to figure out a way to delay his entry into the academy, since he didn't want to meet the main characters of the story so soon. Putting that problem aside for later, he quickly skimmed through the synopsis of one of the books on the shelf and then opened the black book. He discovered that simply reading the summary of a technique was enough for the book to help him learn it. He didn't even need to memorize the details. This confirmed that the true trump card of the protagonist was that mysterious book. Meanwhile, Anne appeared quietly, offering a bit of wine to her young master. It's worth noting that at that moment there were only 4 people in the mansion, Anne and 3 other maids. Everyone else had left with Noise to accompany her during her pregnancy. Moon refused the wine because he wanted to study a bit more and didn't want to end up falling asleep on top of the book. Anne wasn't too pleased by this and soon asked what her young master would like to drink. He replied that he preferred coffee as he needed to stay awake. However, Anne explained that due to certain circumstances, that night there was only red wine and black tea available. Upon hearing that, Moon experienced a slight déjà vu. He remembered that, because of a certain maid's carelessness, rats had invaded the storage room and devoured part of the coffee beans. That's why new beans would only arrive the next day. With no other option, he ended up drinking the black tea. As soon as he drank it, his consciousness began to fade. Before completely losing his senses, Moon still managed to ask why Anne had betrayed him. She replied that she would never do that she would never betray him. Then, she began saying several confusing phrases, showing a possessive, unstable, and obsessive behavior. She claimed that she wanted to stay with him until the end of everything, as if their fates were forever intertwined. When Moon regained consciousness, he realized he was tied up. In front of him, Anne was watching with a satisfied smile, saying that the medicine bought from the black market had worked perfectly. Desperate, Moon tried to understand what was going on, but Anne began explaining that 10 years ago, when she was only 8, she decided she would live by his side. Since then, she had existed only for him, and now he belonged to her. Moon was confused, not understanding what she meant by saying he had strayed from the right path, since according to him, he had done nothing wrong. Even so, Anne ignored his words. She said he didn't need to do anything. After that night, from head to toe, inside and out, from his flesh to his soul, every scent, every strand of hair, every drop of blood, everything would be hers. After spending the whole night locked up with Anne, Moon was completely exhausted. It was clear that this was only the beginning of what he would still have to face. While recovering, he remembered the early days when Anne started serving him. Back then, she was inexperienced, but already showed extreme loyalty. Now he understood that she had been waiting for that moment for the past 10 years. According to her, ever since she started serving him, she had taken care of him, protected him, and guided him. But since he was straying from his true path, she needed to put him back on track. For anyone who knew the original story of the novel, it wasn't hard to recognize that Anne was that unstable character who caused huge problems in the future. When Moon tried to break free from the shackles, he realized he couldn't. To make matters worse, Anne noticed his attempt. She said it was a pity, since it was already noon and she needed to take care of some matters in the mansion. Otherwise, people might start to suspect, or perhaps she could just eliminate everyone and stay alone with him in the mansion, which Moon obviously didn't accept. Seeing his reaction, Anne asked if there was any maid he had feelings for, because if not, it would be easier for her to act. However, she quickly said it was just a joke and that he shouldn't be so nervous. Since she seemed to be in a good mood, Moon took the opportunity to carefully ask her to remove the shackles. She agreed, but warned him not to try anything reckless. That room was completely isolated, with a reinforced steel core. The lock had been made by a master craftsman, and there was only one key. Of course, it had taken an absurd amount of effort to build that hideout right under the Duke's nose. Still, people wouldn't suspect Moon's disappearance, because since his parents had traveled, Anne came up with an excuse. She said he had gone early to the academy because he was feeling lonely. According to Anne herself, nothing would change. She would continue bringing the 3 daily meals and remain faithful and loyal to her young master. However, for some completely unexpected reason, she ended up touching Moon's body in an intimate way, as if that were something natural. It was hard to understand what was going through her mind. Anyway, since Anne needed to return to work so no one would get suspicious, she left after saying goodbye, leaving the protagonist completely naked with only a towel to cover himself. Alone in that steel room, Moon began to reflect on his situation. He wondered what to do, because according to his calculations from the previous night, they had done that 10 times. If things continued at that pace, in 3 years he would probably die from exhaustion. He tried to leave the room, knocked on the door, pushed it with force, but only ended up hurting himself. Everything was made of reinforced steel. Not even sound escaped from inside. The only thing he still had was the black book. When he summoned it, it appeared beside him. With nothing else to do in that room to avoid going insane, Moon decided to train inside the book. While reviewing the magical and physical records, he found a formula that seemed promising for his victory. After some time, he had already done 200 push-ups. That showed that his physical condition was still good. But his motivation was not just to become stronger. He wanted to surpass people like Celia and Anne herself. If he had enough power, he would not be in that situation now. While he was reflecting, Anne appeared again, saying that the scene looked like a wife waiting for her husband to come home from work. But that made no sense, since she was clearly unstable. There was no point trying to understand the mind of a girl like her. Even so, Anne brought water for him to take a bath and also brought food. Before that, she asked what he preferred, to take a bath, to have dinner, or her. Without thinking too much, Moon chose the bath. It had been 2 days since he last took one. The problem was that, while he bathed, Anne refused to leave his side. It was as if she were bathing a child, but little by little the situation became more heated. When Moon became clearly irritated, she stopped and said it was time to eat. On the first bite, Moon noticed that the steak was incredibly soft and refined. He began to eat more and asked where such unusual meat came from. He said he had eaten many steaks before, but that one had a strange texture, almost too soft. Anne replied that it was beef, yes, but she usually used it only to make broths. That day, she decided to serve it as the main dish. Moon then asked which part of the body the cut came from, whether it was fillet, neck, or something like that. And Anne, with complete naturalness, answered that she did not know exactly, but it was from the intimate area of the bull. More specifically, from a bull of the Morgalita breed, known for their strength, especially in a certain aspect. When those bulls entered a state of fury, they spared nothing around them. Even nearby trees became filled with holes because of their violent charges. Because of that, they became known as the sacred bulls of holes. After that absurd explanation, Anne continued telling even more bizarre parts of the story while the protagonist vomited in disgust. She said there were also parts of tiger, goblin, troll, and that if she had dragon meat, it would probably be even more delicious. As if that was not enough, Anne also confessed that she had been making that kind of strange broth for a long time, but only now decided to mention it. Faced with that, Moon became completely outraged. He said he could not endure that situation any longer, and that if she continued locking him in that dark room and forcing him to eat those things, he would simply leave. He tried to order her to free him, but did not even have the chance. Anne had already drugged him again with a single drop of a mysterious substance, and began explaining that it was normal for him to feel angry, since losing freedom forever was indeed something very painful. That was why she told him to simply sleep peacefully and leave everything in her hands, because the night was still young. When Moon finally regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was a girl nearby putting her clothes back on. Anne commented that since he was very tired, she had only done it twice, and she asked if he felt any pain. Moon did not answer, still irritated. Seeing this, Anne said she would grant him a small wish. Moon asked for freedom, but she refused. Then he asked for clothes, but she rejected that as well. The wish apparently was truly small. To give him an idea of what he could request, Anne said he had the right to choose what they would eat the next day. It was a symbolic thing, but better than nothing. Following that idea, Moon remembered that autumn was approaching. During that season, he used to take boat rides on Lake Beepal, admiring the colorful leaves, enjoying Count Locke's wine, and eating the fresh seasonal fish. The problem was that the lake was very far away. Even so, Moon decided to dramatize the situation. He invented a story that sounded almost like a poem, saying that if he could no longer taste those fish, then what meaning would life even have? Faced with that declaration, Anne sighed and ended up agreeing. To strengthen his performance even more, Moon declared that Anne was the best maid in the world and that there was no one like her. He said he would wait anxiously for her return. Delighted by his words, Anne approached and gave him a deep kiss. Then she quickly turned away, saying that Lake Bipal was indeed far, but she would find a way to take care of everything before noon. Outside the room, Anne admitted to herself that she had barely managed to restrain herself, because her young master was, without a doubt, the most adorable person in the world. Meanwhile, Moon, realizing that he finally had a chance, summoned the Black Book. He asked if, besides creating that assassin, it could also generate other simulated training spaces. The book confirmed that it could. Moon wanted that as soon as possible because he had acquired a technique called Thousand Locks, which required intense practice. He needed to train enough to find a way to escape that place. He knew it was better to start immediately before Anne returned. Meanwhile, Anne was already on her way to Lake Bipal, accompanied by a guide who muttered that she seemed a bit crazy. He said she should not be there because at that time of year the lake was extremely dangerous. The man even tried to pull Anne's arm, but she did not like that at all. She immediately pierced his hand and made it clear that her body could only be touched by her young master. Then she demanded to know what was happening at Lake Bipal. The guide explained that the spirit of the lake had awakened. According to rumors, it was a dominant rank magical beast. At that moment, a group of rank B adventurers was trying to defeat it. Ignoring that warning, the guide tried to take advantage of the situation. He said that if Anne paid 300 coins, he would not report her and would let everything go. Anne paid instantly. The man, surprised, asked if she really intended to continue, and Anne confirmed. That made the guide question the reason behind such obsession. Anne replied that it was because of love. Of course, her love was not exactly pure, but it was love in her own way. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the rank B adventurer group. One of the girls in the group was determined. She told herself that after the battle, she would finally confess her feelings to the person she loved. However, she knew she needed to set those thoughts aside because the fight was about to begin. Right at that moment, the lake erupted in a massive wave of energy. Rising from the water was the lake spirit of Bipal itself, already unleashing a destructive attack. Fortunately, the frontline warrior activated a protective shield in time, but it became clear that he would not be able to hold it for long. For that reason, he asked the healer to cast a reinforcement spell on him. Before she could finish her magic, an explosion struck the monster's mouth. It was the mage of the group who took the chance and jumped toward the lake spirit, landing a precise hit on the creature's head. With that, the enemy was defeated. The warrior, relieved, turned to the mage and began praising her, saying she was amazing, the best, and many other compliments. Seeing that scene, the healer was overwhelmed with jealousy. After all, she and the warrior had grown up together. They had made promises to always stay by each other's side. She worked hard to catch up to him and dreamed of the day her feelings would be returned, but he never looked at her the same way. She, the first one to appear in his life, ended up becoming nothing more than a supporting character. In the end, he fell in love with someone else. Consumed by that frustration, she began to wonder why this was happening. Perhaps a new version of Anne was being born right there, a new obsessive girl. And to make things even worse, the warrior continued treating the healer as if she were just a burden, telling her to hurry up and help him face another monster. But before anything could be done, the lake began trembling again. Another explosion of water surged, and this time the true spirit of Lake Bipal appeared, a gigantic creature far more powerful than the previous one. Faced with this new threat, the mage launched a desperate attack trying to injure it, but the strike did not even scratch the creature. The monster became even angrier and unleashed a devastating attack that sent the warrior flying through the air, making him crash near the healer, whose name was Urka. Stunned, the boy told Urka to run away as fast as possible because that monster was far too strong for them to fight. As for him, since he was the one who brought the mage into the group, he felt it was his responsibility to protect her, even if it cost him his life. Hearing that, Urka began to lose emotional control. It looked like a new Yandere was about to be born. But before that could turn into an even bigger problem, the original Yandere, Anne, appeared. Observing the monster, Anne remarked that, judging by the level of that creature, hunting a dragon in the future might not be that difficult after all. And for those wondering why she wanted to hunt a dragon, the answer was simple. She wanted to make soup with the dragon's little friend. That was it. Either way, at the exact moment when the lake spirit was preparing to launch another deadly attack, Anne activated a protection ability. The technique was powerful enough to completely block the creature's strike, leaving everyone present shocked, both the warrior and Urka. Anne approached the group with confidence, saying they should step back because she herself would kill the lake spirit. Without hesitation, she activated an ability that turned solid metal into liquid metal, shaping several floating blades that were launched at the creature. The series of attacks was so intense that it severely wounded the spirit. According to Anne, the reason for her fury was simple. The monster had scared away all the fish in the area, fish she had prepared for her beloved. For that crime, the creature would pay with its life. Amid the blows, Anne Anne unleashed an attack so powerful that it split the lake spirit in half. The scene was both impressive and terrifying. After all, how would the protagonist ever be able to face someone like her? Meanwhile, on the other side, Urka called out to her group mate, whose name was Rod. However, instead of worrying about Urka, he simply commented that Tia was fine. Then he asked Urka to check whether the girl who had appeared earlier was an adventurer, because if she was, they could try inviting her to the group. After all, she was incredibly strong. Meanwhile, Anne was examining the fish that had been thrown far away by the explosion in the lake. She tried to identify whether any of them were edible, but felt sad when she realized she could not remember which one was her master's favorite. As a loyal maid, she felt disappointed for not knowing his tastes well. Soon after, Urka approached Anne to talk about the fish. She explained that some were edible, while others, especially the brightly colored ones, were poisonous. Hearing that, Anne asked whether Urka liked fish. Urka replied that she did, since she lived in front of the lake and therefore knew how to tell the types apart. During the conversation, Urka took the opportunity to teach Anne how to properly prepare the fish. Then she asked whether Anne was doing all of that for someone special. Anne answered naturally that she was doing it for her beloved. The answer touched Urka, who commented that Anne's partner must be very lucky to have someone like her by his side. Thinking about the protagonist, it was hard to say whether he was actually lucky in that relationship. But according to Anne, her love was not fully understood yet, and he would learn with time. Hearing that, Urka said she had a question about love, since Anne seemed to know a lot about the subject. As a token of gratitude for learning how to cook the fish, Anne promised to answer sincerely every question Urka wanted to ask. Urka then invented a story, saying that a friend of hers had long loved a boy who now seemed to be interested in another girl. Upon hearing that, Anne commented that this boy was probably one of those fireplace types, who spread warmth to everyone around without realizing the feelings they create. Urka continued explaining that, with the arrival of this new girl, something like a love triangle had formed. Because of that, her friend did not know whether she should continue loving the boy or give up completely. Anne, without sugarcoating anything, asked directly how much that friend, who was obviously Urka herself, loved that boy. Urka tried to deny it, saying it was merely someone else's story, but her expression betrayed her. In the end, she admitted she had loved that boy for more than 10 years. She declared that the love she felt was so deep that she would be capable of sacrificing the entire world because of him. After that confession, Anne simply replied that, in that case, Urka already had her answer. Of course, Urka had no idea what was going on. In response, Anne told her she should simply follow the purest desire of her heart, give everything for the one she loved, and never choose something that might lead to regret in the future. Her words sounded beautiful, but deep down, she was encouraging Urka to do exactly what she herself had done with the protagonist. As she listened and reflected on her own feelings, Urka felt something burning inside her. A mysterious voice began to echo, asking whether she was truly willing to sacrifice everything for the one she loved and whether she would accept seeing the two of them happy together. Urka could not accept that idea. Then the voice whispered that she should follow her deepest desire, to conquer, to take for herself, to leave her mark on the one she wanted, and to turn him into something that belonged only to her. Even if Rod was strong, that voice promised to grant Urka the power of love's great absolute force. With that, she returned to the group. When she arrived, Rod asked if she was okay, and she replied that she was fine, just a little low on mana. Anne, being a maid from a noble house, could join them without any problems. However, Tia noticed a strange mark in the center of Urka's chest. Urka immediately tried to hide it, saying that the group needed to get out of there as soon as possible. She suggested that there might be a third lake beast, and that it would be better to return and warn the clan. On top of that, Tia was still injured and needed care. Without hesitation, Rod offered to carry her in his arms and take her to safety, which made Urka completely lose control. It was as if the kind and gentle Urka was slowly turning into a real yandere. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon where Moon was, Anne arrived bringing the food he had wanted so badly. He was excited, saying that if she had not shown up, he probably would have died of hunger. Anne was visibly moved by his reaction and asked if that meant he was starting to accept her in his heart. But Moon answered coldly, saying that it had nothing to do with that. He was just scared of starving to death. Anyway, Anne had prepared 2 fish, one steamed and the other grilled over charcoal. Moon started with the steamed fish. Of course, he did not even get the chance to serve himself, since Anne would not miss the opportunity to feed him directly. At least the food was actually good. The problem was that this kind of fish was known for having lots of tiny bones, and Moon ended up choking on one of them. Without hesitation, Anne said she was going to kiss him. She claimed she had high lung capacity and that if she blew hard enough into his mouth, she could force the bone out. Moon did not even have time to react. She just leaned in and did exactly what she said. He almost died from that kiss, but in the end, the bone was removed. After that, Moon continued eating by himself. When he finished, he thanked her for the food and admitted that Anne really was the best cook in the Empire. At that very moment, Anne remarked that since her young master had finished eating, it was time to fulfill the Duke's order and finally produce an heir for House Campbell. That proposal was immediately rejected by Moon, which led Anne to ask if, by any chance, he was already tired of her. Moon explained that it was not that. He had just finished eating, and that was not the best time. He also reminded her that she had just come back from a long trip and needed to rest, because if she did not recover, the baby would not be born healthy. Upon hearing those words, Anne was moved. She firmly stated that if it was not going to happen that night, then they would definitely do it the following night. She even mentioned that while passing through the city of Savetes, known for its textile industry, she had bought a very seductive outfit, consisting of shiny black tights and a bunny costume. When she revealed this, Moon's nose actually started bleeding, although he tried to hide it, considering himself a man of great honor. The problem was that it did not help. Anne had known him since childhood and knew that he had some questionable magazines hidden away. In fact, she had read those magazines precisely to understand the preferences of her young master. And to no one's surprise, most of the girls depicted in them wore black tights. With so much evidence, Moon had no way to deny anything. In any case, Anne left to take care of some pending matters and promised to return at night. As soon as she left, Moon discreetly spat out a few fish bones that were still in his mouth, showing that despite everything, he was still thinking about how to escape that situation. By his count, based on previous days, he had about 3 hours to try and get away. And this time, he was confident. He had recently learned a lock-picking technique using fish bones. The big obstacle was that the door lock had 12 different cores, meaning 12 internal mini-locks, and each lever had to be positioned exactly like the original key. If he made any wrong move, the system would reset and go back to the beginning. Worse still, the fish bones he used as tools were extremely fragile. If the lock reset, the bones would break, leaving him with no options. In that situation, he had only 4 bones. If he broke them all, Anne would discover his escape attempt, and then he would be completely lost. On the other hand, if he did not try at that moment, he might never have another chance. With that in mind, Moon kept trying, even when only 3 levers were left. When he checked the time through the black book, he saw it was 5:30 in the afternoon. Only 1 hour remained until Anne would return with the next meal. The worst part was that he had only 1 bone left. That would be his last attempt. So, he activated the fishbone unlocking technique at full power, determined to escape. Meanwhile, Anne was once again preparing fish soup. Noel, who was with her, praised the flavor, saying it was truly delicious. During their conversation, Noel mentioned that in recent days she had noticed Anne setting aside special food and testing several new recipes. That seemed strange, as neither the young master nor the master of the house, nor even the lady were present to try them. As soon as she heard that, Anne was ready to strike, but Noel quickly said she had misunderstood. According to her, it seemed like Anne was taking care of a little animal, perhaps a cat, which was technically against the mansion's rules. However, since Anne was now the head maid, Noel could not tell anyone. Taking advantage of the moment, Anne sincerely asked Noel to keep that a secret, which she readily agreed to. While they talked about kittens, Noel asked if she could go along to help feed the little animal. Anne, however, declined. She said the kitten was still very afraid of strangers, and when it was ready, she would introduce it to everyone. During the walk to the dungeon, Anne reflected on the whole situation. She was glad that Noel had believed that story, because if she had not, Anne would have been forced to kill her and hide the body. But now that everything was under control, a new idea crossed her mind. She thought that perhaps Moon was getting bored being locked in that room and that there was no longer any strange discomfort in her body. After all, she was already pregnant. According to what she had heard, the birth would happen in about 10 months. With that in mind, Anne began to consider leaving some books for Moon, something that could distract him. She also thought about getting a pet, maybe even a kitten, as Noel had mentioned. But while she was still thinking about it, she noticed something strange. The dungeon door was open. On the other side, Moon had already escaped and was wandering through the sewers, since that dungeon was connected to the duchy's drainage system. However, he could not see anything in there. He kept slipping, tripping on the wet floor. Even so, that was not exactly a problem for him, since the only magic Moon Campbell could use was the light spell. The real problem was that the moment he cast the light, a knife flew in his direction. He did not even need to look back to know who had thrown it. In a panic, trying not to be caught, Moon used the shadow step technique, which helped him a lot, and began throwing several knives in all directions, causing the surrounding walls to collapse. She even kicked a cabinet that appeared along the way. Taking advantage of the confusion, Moon managed to hide. Meanwhile, Anne searched for him, saying she had underestimated her young master. She said he would not escape from her hands, and that if he returned willingly, she would forget the escape attempt. Otherwise, next time he would even lose his little friend, since she did not need him anymore. After all, she was already pregnant. Anne carefully scanned the the area but felt no change in the air. She looked further ahead, not noticing Moon's presence. About 10 minutes later, when he was about to come out of hiding, Anne suddenly reappeared. Luckily, she missed the exact location where he was and lamented not finding him. Since she had already searched the entire sewer area, she decided to leave and look outside. What she did not know was that Moon was still hiding inside. In fact, he had fainted from fear and only woke up sometime later when the black book activated again. As soon as he woke up, Moon knew he needed to find a way out of there as quickly as possible. Without hesitation, he used the shadow step, a technique that allowed him to escape at high speed. Upon emerging from the hiding spot and noticing that it was raining, he felt like shouting in relief, but held back immediately. Who knew if Anne was still nearby? He had to flee and fast. If she found him, that tragic fate shown by the black book would definitely come true. 2 days later, Moon was on the plains of Belhand, an open and silent field. Even with his body exhausted and the landscape looking devastated, he could not stop. There was only one city left between him and safety. If Anne managed to track him again, he would not have time to escape. Considering his options, he thought about whether to head for the capital or return to the academy. The second option seemed safer. At the academy, he would be more protected. While walking and analyzing his alternatives, he came across a very cliché scene. 3 bandits were chasing a girl. Despite the situation, she showed calm and reason by asking why they were committing a robbery in broad daylight. She wanted to know if they were not afraid that some hero might pass by and punish them. The bandits confidently replied that they were trained professionals, with a detailed plan that included an escape route, a clear target, and no room for error. To them, that was what being a true professional meant. One of the bandits threatened to cut off the girl's hand if she tried to escape. They assured her that they had searched the entire area and that no one was nearby. But at the exact moment they said that, Moon emerged from the water, which gave them a huge scare. The criminals even joked, asking if mermen were real now, since he had appeared out of nowhere. Taking advantage of the moment, Moon asked if they felt no shame. 3 men against 1 girl. If they were truly brave, they should face him instead. The bandits accepted the challenge and allowed the girl to flee, which left Moon confused. He had nothing of value besides the tattered clothes he wore, so their interest made no sense. When he asked about it, the bandits said they were not looking for money. Faced with such a peculiar merman, their plans had changed. Now they wanted to steal pleasure. The situation became increasingly absurd, as if it had come straight out of a story written by someone completely detached from reality. It was like those works called Fujo, where men were forcibly involved with one another. As the bandits ran toward Moon, the girl, who we would later find out was named Erika, cast a powerful fire spell. Even with the 3 criminals still in the water, the spell was strong enough to burn them to ashes instantly. In any case, Erika thanked the world, saying that if Moon had not distracted the bandits, she would not have had enough time to recite and cast the spell. Moon even tried to thank her for the help, but she suddenly interrupted him, asking why he was walking around naked like that. She wanted to know if, by any chance, he was some kind of exhibitionist or something. Moon quickly responded, explaining that it had nothing to do with exhibitionism. He was in that situation due to certain circumstances beyond his control. Then, he introduced himself simply as Moon, avoiding any mention of his last name Campbell, and stated that, at the moment, he was unemployed. Erika also introduced herself, saying that she was a former adventurer and that she was now training to become a good wife. She also mentioned that she had gotten married the day before, which led Moon to sincerely congratulate her. However, their conversation was interrupted by the loud sound of his stomach growling, revealing that he was starving. Noticing this, Erika said she would prepare something to eat. After all, thanks to Moon, she had not been robbed while returning home. Besides, she was going to cook for her husband, who, according to her, was the same height as Moon. The reason for mentioning the height was still unclear, but it did not seem important at that moment. Moon then thanked her enthusiastically, saying that Erika was like an angel, a goddess, and that her partner was surely a very lucky person to have her by his side. Despite his good intentions, he had heard this kind of compliment before, and the last time things had not ended well. While they were on their way to Erika's house, Moon took the chance to ask why there were bandits in such an isolated town. He was also curious about the fact that, even though she was married, she was walking alone in a place like that. Erika explained that she had gone to a neighboring city to take care of some matters related to her husband's work. She used the trip to buy fresh food. Since she and Rode had recently gotten married, they decided to take a break from their activities as adventurers. However, before taking time off, they needed to inform the guild, also called the Gremio. If they did not report anything, the guild's system would mark both of them as dead, which would cause many problems later on. Putting that aside, Erika asked if Moon wanted dinner. He accepted immediately. However, something strange happened. Suddenly, he felt as if he had heard someone say, "I love you," which made him dizzy and confused. When he asked if Erika had said anything, she answered that she had not heard anything. Sometime later, they arrived at a small village. Erika's house was absurdly large, but according to her, that place was actually the mayor's house. She was only living there temporarily. Moon noticed that the village seemed very calm. The streets were empty and all the houses looked open. That made him wonder if it it was not dangerous to live there with so many signs of carelessness. To answer his question, Urka began explaining about Lake Beephole, known for its large quantity of fish. The entire economy of that small village revolved around fishing and selling those fish. She commented that both she and her husband helped the residents with transportation and safety, since they were both former adventurers. There were not many people in the village at that moment because, as the fishing had been abundant, most of the residents had traveled to make deliveries. That was why Urka was alone and acting as the temporary guardian of the area. While Moon thought about all that, he heard that same voice again, saying, "I love you," as if it were circling around him. Pretending to ignore it, he entered the house with Urka. She offered him some water and said she would get clothes for him. Before drinking, Moon became suspicious. He remembered past bad experiences and inspected the liquid to check for poison. In the end, it was just normal water. Even so, he knew there was something strange about that place. Despite his suspicions, he enjoyed the dinner, got new clothes, and thinking that he might be able to trust Urka, decided to introduce himself as Moon Campbell. He asked her for a favor. When she heard the surname Campbell, Urka immediately understood that he was the son of a duke. Moon's request was simple. He needed a horse to reach the academy. He promised that once he arrived, he would send money as repayment. He did not explain his reasons in detail, but he knew that if he rented a horse on his own, his name would appear in the records and Anne could track him. Even without understanding everything, Urka said she would help, but she also made it clear that she wanted a reward of 20,000 mels, since she was getting involved in something that was not her problem. Since it was already late, she showed Moon his room, explaining that the bathroom was next to it. She asked him not to go around opening doors without permission, especially the back door, where hunted meat was hanging outside to dry. If he opened it, the smell would be terrible. Since that house was not hers, it was better to respect the space. With all instructions given, Moon wished her good night, and Urka replied the same. However, once she was alone, Urka muttered to herself that it was a great pity, because the protagonist would not live to see the sunrise. A young noble only had value while alive. Dead, he was worth nothing. Even so, for Urka, that would be the last sacrifice offered to the god of love. It was hard to imagine how someone who seemed so gentle had turned into something so dangerous. Meanwhile, far away, Anne was holding a piece of cloth that carried Moon's scent. With that, she practically confirmed where he was. No matter how much he ran, he would never escape her. Back on Moon's side, he was sleeping peacefully until he suddenly woke up thirsty. Right after that, he heard a sound that seemed like a dog barking. Curious, he left the room and followed the direction of the noise. At the same moment, Urka appeared, asking what he was doing. He explained that he needed to use the bathroom and mentioned the sound. He thought there was a dog nearby, and she confirmed it, saying that it was the cutest and smartest dog in the world. If it had barked, it was probably hungry. Moon, thinking it was normal, commented that he also liked dogs and asked if he could see it. Urka responded in a way strangely similar to Anne's response, saying that her dog was very timid and that she would only show it to other people once she managed to tame it completely. With that, Moon dropped the subject and said he would just go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Urka's expression changed completely. The sweetness vanished and gave place to something dark, as if she were hiding dangerous intentions. After using the bathroom, Moon noticed that the place looked like it had not been cleaned in centuries because the smell was so strong. When he left, he heard another sound, this time as if someone were chewing something. He imagined it might be the so-called dog. Carefully, he approached the window and looked outside, trying not to make noise. However, what he saw horrified him. It was not a dog, but a human being eating on the ground like an animal. The shock was so great that he stepped back and ended up breaking a dry branch. The sound caught Urka's attention, and she went outside to check if it had been just her imagination. Even without finding anything, she murmured that she needed to start the ritual soon because it required time. As soon as she walked away, Moon panicked. The woman who had seemed so sweet was, in truth, someone capable of turning her own husband into a creature treated like a dog. Realizing how dangerous the situation was, he concluded that the only option was to escape immediately. Meanwhile, Urka returned to the room where Moon was supposed to be. When she noticed he had disappeared, her expression changed completely. She became furious. Before she could act, she heard knocks at the door and assumed it might be Moon. But when she opened it, she found Anne. For some reason, Urka called her master. And in fact, if one thought about it carefully, Anne had been the inspiration that guided her actions, even if the methods of the two were different. Anne entered and accepted the cup of tea Urka offered. She asked why Urka was dressed like a maid, and Urka explained that she had left in a rush and did not have time to change clothes. Then she wanted to know why Urka was calling her master. Urka replied, saying that, thanks to Anne's words, she had gathered the courage to confess her love, and was now with Rode. Proudly, she even asked if Anne wanted to see him. Anne agreed, and Urka went to get him. While waiting, Anne noticed something important. Moon's scent was still in the air. Mixed with it, there was also a strong smell of blood. When Urka returned, Anne thought she might try to hide the kind of treatment she was giving Rode, but that was not what happened. She showed him exactly as he was, without hiding anything. She even asked Rode for his paw, and even though Anne did not really understand what that meant, she chose not to comment. She thought every couple had their own games. She congratulated Urka for her courage and dedication, but Urka replied that she was still far from reaching the level of her own master. Even so, Anne disagreed. She said she had done much less. Because of her distraction and overconfidence, her own husband had escaped from her control. Urka then asked if she was talking about Moon, which surprised Anne. Curious, she asked if Urka had seen him. She confirmed that she had and explained the whole situation. However, she revealed that Moon had escaped. It had already been about 2 hours since he had left the house. Even so, she assured that there was no reason to worry, because she had placed a tracking spell on him. She said there was no way for him to escape. To activate the tracking, Urka explained that she needed to cast a second spell. Before that, she asked Anne not to open any door in the house. Anne agreed to the request, and noticing that she was already in the room where Moon had slept, lay down on the bed and began smelling him. While she lost herself in that moment of pleasure, Urka ended up leaving her little dog behind. Rode, for some reason, managed to break free for a moment from the spell. Desperate, he began to scream, calling the name of the ant, the villagers, doing everything he could to alert Anne. With effort, he managed to pronounce a few clear words, begging her to flee from there as fast as possible and, under no circumstance, open the last door of the house. But instead of running away, Anne did the exact opposite. Driven by curiosity and suspicion, she walked toward the door that had been forbidden. The door was locked, but that posed no obstacle for her since she had control over metals. She used her ability and forced it open. As soon as she opened it, she saw something that should never have been revealed. The inside of the room was filled with bodies, many bodies, and the most frightening part was that, by looking at the faces, it was already possible to recognize that they belonged to the villagers themselves. In the center of that place, Urka was kneeling as if she were in a trance, surrounded by a dark and spiritual atmosphere, as if she were in another plane. At that exact moment, Urka appeared, saying that in the end, her master had discovered her little secret. She said that she knew Anne would understand. After all, everything there was the result of love. Anne, upon witnessing the scene, realized immediately that Urka had been corrupted by some entity. She knew that was the influence of an evil god. However, Urka firmly denied it. She insisted that it was the god of love, not an evil god. She said he had granted her everything she desired without asking for anything in return. He had only shown her her true essence. For Urka, he did not demand sacrifices. He only awakened truth within his followers. She went on to say that the two of them were the same, and that only one last offering was missing to complete everything, and that offering would be her master. She hoped Anne would accept her fate. Faced with this, Anne concluded that there was no return. The person she once knew no longer existed. With a fast movement, she used her magic blade Anklar and cut Urka's neck, as she could not allow her to harm anyone else. While falling, wounded, and bleeding, Urka still had enough strength to ask when exactly she had harmed anyone. In her view, she had only given love to everyone. But Anne replied that that was not love. Even confused, Urka asked why. After all, she had followed exactly the words her master had once told her. Words she had never forgotten, that one must love for oneself everything that one loves. For Urka, that was the true meaning of love. Faced with those words, the only thing Anne could do was apologize. Upon leaving the house, she was visibly disappointed. She felt responsible because, with her own words, she had led someone to be corrupted by an evil god. As a form of repentance, she decided that as soon as she recovered the protagonist, she would prepare a proper funeral for Urka. However, it seemed there would be no time for that. The voice that repeated "I love you" began echoing again, now coming from inside the house along with an extremely evil aura. Right behind it, a monster made of blood emerged. Anne immediately recognized what it was. That creature was the damned god himself. Meanwhile, on the other side, Moon had run to a small clearing to rest, but he barely had time to breathe when someone flew past him, making dust rise. When the dust settled, he realized it was Anne, completely wounded, indicating she had faced something extremely dangerous. He could have fled, but upon seeing her condition, he became worried. He asked what had happened, but Anne said there was no time to explain. In fact, there was not. The voice that said "I love you" appeared again, but this time it called for its master, begging for them to merge. Everything became more confusing. Urka's faith, which seemed harmless at first, had now given birth to a true evil god. Before that gigantic creature, Moon was paralyzed. He did not know what to do. At the moment when his death seemed inevitable, Anne threw herself in front of him and saved him. If it were not for her, perhaps only their future child would be able to continue that story. Even though she managed to divert the attack from him, she was also partially hit. Wounded and gasping, she told Moon to run away from there as fast as possible. As soon as she dealt with the monster, she would catch up to him. But the problem was that the monster was not willing to let them escape. Anne was preparing to fight when suddenly Moon used Shadow Step at its maximum capacity, moving quickly and dodging the attack. The movement was so surprising that it caught Anne off guard. Moon explained that she did not even know how to lie properly, and even if she had been a little harsh with him, she was still a servant of the Campbell family. He could not simply let someone like her die before his eyes. In addition, when it came to running away, Moon was a true specialist. He managed to escape several attacks using the shadow step, even though he did not have full control over the technique. The effort exhausted his body, but there was no time to rest. The monster continued to chase them with ferocity. The only solution was to jump into a lake. Moon had realized that the monster, being made of blood, would not be able to maintain its form in water, since it diluted its body. But there was a new problem. Now it was not the monster that threatened Anne, but the water itself. She did not know how to swim. For her not to drown, Moon had to make some concessions and improvise a recovery underwater. Meanwhile, on the creature's side, the one no one could even tell if it was a goddess or a demon, the smell of blood had vanished. That was disappointing. Even so, after calming whatever it was that constituted its nerves or its blood, the entity remembered that it only needed one more sacrifice to complete its transformation into a true evil goddess. Therefore, it decided to hunt another prey. When it was finally complete, it would return after Moon and Anne. Meanwhile, Moon and Anne had reached a cave. There, he improvised first aid and took care of her the best he could. When Anne saw that Moon was taking care of her, she asked why he was doing that. She truly did not understand the reason. After all, she herself had imprisoned him and done several strange things to him in the past. In response, Moon commented that apparently she had finally realized she was wrong. Anne agreed. She said that in fact, Urka's current situation was partly her fault. Because of certain actions she had taken, Urka ended up following the path she was on now. That was why Anne wanted to know if Moon felt anger or hatred toward her, since, in a way, she had almost killed him. So Moon held her hands and said that what she did was indeed horrible, but the feeling of love itself was not the problem. The mistake was only the way she expressed that love. Now that she recognized that, he held no resentment. And besides, he was alive, was he not? In a way, the fact that he was still there was enough reason not to hold grudges. Despite it seeming unbelievable, Moon had truly forgiven her. And even if many would not understand how he could do that, he did. Perhaps after all that, Anne would really start to change. Or maybe not, but impulsively she leaned forward and gave Moon an intense kiss. After that, she felt as if all her energy had been restored and claimed that she was in her best condition, as if she could even face a god. But that was nothing more than exaggeration. The truth was that she was still very weak, and because of that, the two decided to rest a little before moving on. During the rest, Moon took the opportunity to ask what Anne meant when she said that Urka was a follower of an evil god. Anne began to explain that Urka's situation was similar to her own. The difference was that those chosen by gods received direct blessings from the divinities, while followers made pacts in exchange for power. In Urka's case, she was not even considered a follower anymore, since power flowed constantly through her. That meant the evil god was using Urka as a channel to manifest in the world. Moon, remembering the original novel, knew that humanity's worst calamities had always been connected to that evil god. Because of that, he said they needed to stop Urka from completing the sacrifice of the last living person, which would bring the god to Earth. Anne agreed, but stated that Urka had probably already done it, since besides the two of them, there was one more living person in the village, Rude. Even so, there was still a chance to confront the evil god, since he still could not fully control Urka's body. Anne said she would do that alone, because everything had started because of her words. However, Moon insisted on going with her. Even if Anne was a little unstable, he considered Urka a friend. After all, even not being completely corrupted, she had shown kindness by offering him food in the past. Moon believed in her. It did not matter if she was crazy. He wanted to keep hope alive. Anne tried to convince Moon not to go, but he kept insisting. That made her start to cry, because she did not want to lose him. And besides, her power was no longer working properly and she needed a lot of metal to continue fighting. When they looked behind them and used a light spell, they ended up having a surprise. They found the treasure hideout of the mountain bandits. There were coins and a lot of metal scattered all over the place. Among all the valuable items, Moon picked up only a simple sword. Anne, on the other hand, equipped herself with so much metal that she even formed steel wings, looking like a true Valkyrie. And now, with everything ready, it was time for the two of them to go after the friend and disciple they needed to save. Sometime later, on top of a gigantic steel pillar, Moon noticed that Urka, or perhaps the evil god itself, had grown 10 times larger. That meant her power had also increased greatly. Faced with that terrifying situation, Moon began reflecting on how everything had gone wrong since the moment he chose to stand in front of the dagger meant to kill Celia. But now it was too late to regret anything. It no longer mattered whether he was facing an evil god or not. He was determined to put an end to that still that night. Urka, now colossal in size, noticed his presence and asked if he was finally willing to to accept her love. Moon answered that he would never accept it because he was a parachutist. The sentence made no sense at all, but that was exactly what he said. Right after, he jumped from the pillar, going straight toward her, and she reacted immediately, running after him. Going back a little in time, Moon had already explained that Urka could not be killed in that state. Her body was being used as a channel, so it was necessary to find the source of contamination, some object that allowed the evil god to manifest in that world. It could be a ring, necklace, bracelet, or any hidden accessory. That was because, according to the laws of that world, not even gods could project their power out of nowhere. That was why he asked Anne to open a path to Urka so he could use his mobility and find the object. Anne did not want to accept it. She said he was heading straight into danger, and even though she was a little better, she did not have strength to face Urka head-on. Moon insisted, claiming that there were only the two of them there, and since he did not possess combat strength, he had to be the one to serve as the bait. Whether he lived or not, he would leave it in the hands of his maid. After all, she was the best of them all, was she not? Back to the present, Anne appeared at the top of the pillar and unleashed several attacks with spears that looked like steel at first glance, but were actually made of silver. With those attacks, she opened a direct path to Urka and, as she approached, asked if her master had truly returned. Anne confirmed that she had and said she was there to save her. The battle then began. Anne attacked, Urka defended, and so they continued trading blows. Anne's weapons were made of silver because, according to Urka, that was the best material to exterminate evil spirits and demons. But against her, that would not work because she was now a god. At that moment, Moon appeared and delivered a powerful strike. However, the strike had no effect. In fact, it only made things worse because Urka reacted and attacked immediately. Luckily, Anne managed to protect him at the last moment with a drop of silver, but even so, Moon was thrown far away, badly hurt and bleeding. While he was lying on the ground, Urka tried to launch another attack. Anne tried to protect Moon again, but Urka pushed her away with a huge hand made of blood. The attack did not hit the protagonist directly, and before Urka could locate him, Anne returned to face her. Farther away, Moon realized he had managed to dodge the attack, or rather, that someone had dodged the attack for him. After receiving a potion, he clearly saw who had saved his life. It was none other than Rude. After Moon's wounds were more or less healed, he and Rude finally introduced themselves to each other while watching the intense battle happening before them. The fight was so brutal that neither of them had the conditions to intervene. Even so, Moon took the moment to ask Rude why his wife, known as Urka, had become a follower of the evil god. Rude replied that he did not know for sure, but he believed it was his fault. As her husband, he felt that taking responsibility was the least he could do. Even without fully understanding why someone would remain married to someone so dangerous, Moon felt empathy for Rude and therefore asked if he knew where the object used by the evil god was. Rude did not know either, so Moon explained that this object was something consecrated, used in the rituals for the evil god. Digging through his memory, Rude remembered that every time Urka committed a murder, a symbol on her heart absorbed all the surrounding blood, as if feeding that dark power. Meanwhile, in the battle, Anne could barely defend herself. Her attacks had no effect, and the situation only worsened. Suddenly, Urka heard someone calling her name. It was Rude who was holding Moon in his arms, declaring that he had obtained the necessary sacrifice. Seeing that scene, Anne fell into despair, begging Rude to release her husband. But Urka did not allow it. Even with Anne's attempts, she did not have enough strength to face Urka in that state. Right after that, Urka undone her gigantic form and returned to her normal size. She declared that by performing the last sacrifice for the god of love, she and Rude would be able to stay together forever. Rude agreed, saying that if he had realized all of this earlier, maybe she would not have followed that path with no return. Even so, nothing else mattered, because he was willing to carry that burden by her side. Going a little back in time, Moon and Rude had planned that action. Moon thought everything was too risky, but Rude explained that when Urka assumed that gigantic form, it was nearly impossible to reach her main body. It was in that body that the receptacle of the evil god was located. However, if she were forced to return to her smaller form, it would be much easier to hit that point. That was why Rude decided to act as bait. After all, he felt that this was his responsibility. Back to the present, Urka seemed shaken by the situation, and Moon took the chance. He attacked her from behind, striking directly in the center of the heart, where he found a kind of totem, the object connected to the evil god. The blow left Urka distressed, but even so, she still tried to strike back. However, her attack did not reach Moon, because Rude stepped in front of him at the last moment. He fulfilled his promise of staying with her until the end. The problem was that even with the totem destroyed and ripped out of Urka's body, the ritual somehow still completed itself. Without warning, a gigantic explosion occurred and launched Moon far away. And then, a massive pillar filled with an evil aura emerged at the location. To make things worse, Anne was right in the middle of that energy. Upon seeing that, Moon fell into despair and tried to pull her out using the shadow step. But the aura would not let her go no matter what. As if that was not enough, a giant mouth appeared in the sky, ready to devour the two of them. Faced with the danger, the only thing Moon could do was call upon the Black Book. At first, it looked like nothing happened, but soon he found himself transported to a completely strange space where the Black Book floated alone in the air. There, Moon asked if there was any way to save the two of them. The book answered yes and asked him to look up. When he raised his eyes, Moon saw something astonishing, a gigantic burning eye staring directly at him. In the same instant, strange voices began echoing in his mind, declaring that that was the corrupted king, another one of the so-called evil gods. From what it seemed, it had been the Black Book itself that summoned him. The idea was simple, yet terrifying. To face an evil god, it was necessary to use the power of another evil god. Thus, the corrupted king asked Moon directly if he wanted his power. Deep inside, Moon did not want to accept that, but outwardly, he ended up saying yes because he knew he could not refuse. Upon his answer, a page left the Black Book and flew toward the corrupted king, who observed it with surprise. The moment made Moon think he was going to die, but to his surprise, the corrupted king declared that the deal was done. The cost of granting that power would be 0. However, there was one detail. Was Moon willing to accept the power of an entity known as an evil god? Even feeling uneasy, Moon thought about everything that was at stake. Outside, there was someone special waiting for him, and he could not die now. Because of that, he accepted the power. From that moment on, everything depended on him. Would he be able to withstand such an immense energy? As soon as he received the power, Moon realized that stealing the strength of a god was not something easy. The pain was immense, but he needed to endure it, because dying at that moment would be the same as drowning at the edge of the beach after crossing an entire ocean. Outside, a blue flame appeared, which made the evil god immediately panic. Moon, now enveloped by that flame, gently placed Anne on the ground, saying that they would be together soon. At that moment, the evil god, who had taken on a feminine form, appeared confused and frightened, asking what the corrupted king was doing there. Moon answered that if she could grant power, he could also receive it, and more, he had paid a high price for it. Therefore, all that farce of an evil god should end right then and there. Next, Moon summoned several giant eyes, similar to those of the corrupted king, and with them launched a devastating attack, destroying the entire place and completely evaporating the body of the evil god. After the attack, the corrupted king left Moon's body, but despite that, the evil god was not completely dead. In his last words, he admitted that he did not know the corrupted king had his eye on someone like Moon, but guaranteed that this was not the end. Even having been defeated, they would certainly meet again. It was then that Moon snapped back to reality and fell into despair. He began apologizing to the god, revealing that his real name was not even Moon Campbell. In fact, he said that his name was Ariel. In the end, the evil god simply vanished. Now Moon carried the burden of having an evil god tied to him. Since there was nothing else he could do at that moment, he knew that if anything happened, he only needed to ask the Black Book to give another page to the corrupted king. With that, the situation would be under control. Putting that aside, Anne approached Moon, saying that she had been afraid of losing him forever. Even with that emotional moment, she wanted to understand what had happened, because from her point of view, she only saw Moon standing and the evil god defeated on the ground. Since Moon could not tell her that he had summoned another evil god, he invented an excuse saying that everything had been part of a plan he had arranged with Rude. But more important than that was what Anne needed to do next. She wanted to have her final words with Erica, who was gravely injured. When Anne approached, Erica asked if everything was over, and Anne answered yes, the evil god that controlled her had been defeated. Hearing that, Erica began apologizing to Anne, saying that she had deceived everyone. In truth, that story of being controlled by the evil god had nothing to do with Anne. Erica had already had a connection with that dark entity for a long time. She performed small sacrifices, offering bodies of monsters and beasts she hunted, in exchange for simple powers. She did all of that because Rude was an incredible person, and if she did not use dishonest methods, she would never feel capable of standing by his side. At that time, the evil god did not do anything unusual with the sacrifices. Because of that, Erica gradually got used to it, until she had the courage to talk to Anne and confess her feelings toward Rude. Hearing that, Anne asked if he had rejected her. Erica answered no. In fact, Rude also liked her, but the two of them could not be together. That was because Tia was pregnant with his child. Despite everything, Rude truly loved Erica, but in a moment of weakness, drunk and sad because he could not confess his feelings, he ended up getting involved with Tia, who who claimed to be pregnant. That did not make much sense, since everything happened only once. Suspicious, Urka used the power of the evil god to investigate and discovered that the pregnancy was fake. Tia was using it as a way to manipulate Rude. After exposing that lie, Urka felt that there was no way back. Her heart had been overtaken by hatred. At the moment she killed Tia, that was when Rude appeared. Seeing the scene, he believed that Urka was being controlled by a dark force. Not knowing what to do, Urka made another request to the god, that Rude would accept her love, and it was that wish that made everything irreversible. Urka regretted everything deeply. She said that if she had gathered the courage to confess her feelings earlier, maybe none of that would have happened. Now there was no more time, and as a consequence, she wished her master a long and happy life. She also asked Anne to show the world that love could indeed be something beautiful and true. Sometime later, Moon and Anne held a proper funeral for Urka and Rude. The ceremonies were carried out in respect for the souls of both, and with that the matter was closed. It was time to move forward. However, before leaving, Anne reflected on everything that had happened. Seeing the way Urka tried to show her love, she realized she had also been acting incorrectly regarding the feelings she had for Moon. Rationally, Anne knew she had been mistaken in many moments. But even so, her heart could not suppress the feelings she had for Moon. She began wondering whether, perhaps, her love was wrong. Then Moon commented that maybe she was confusing the desire to possess him with true love. However, he could not explain it precisely, since each person carried different thoughts inside themselves. Whether that was love or merely a desire for possession, only the person themselves could answer sincerely. Faced with that comment, Anne grew thoughtful and began to question what love truly was. She told Moon that she knew everything she had done up to that point proved that their relationship would never be normal. Even so, she wanted to ask for another chance. More specifically, she wanted to return to the mansion, because that was still the only place she considered home. She did not want to become the lady of the house or anything grand. She only wanted to continue being Moon's personal maid, but of course, with a few extra privileges while staying by his side. Moon's answer was simple. He held her hand and said that they should return home. Upon hearing that, Anne became deeply emotional and declared that her young master was truly an incredible person. Deep down, Moon was feeling proud of himself, since in the end, he had managed to completely change the former Yandere she used to be. And since Anne had finally returned to normal, the terrible fate of being chopped to pieces in a basement had been avoided. Or at least that was what he thought. 2 days later, already inside the mansion, Moon found himself imprisoned again in the same dungeon as before. That was when Anne appeared, explaining that she made him wait because upstairs, with the other maids around, they could not do what they would do down there. She then removed his shackles, and Moon asked if she was planning to lock him up there again, which would be rather depressing. But Anne assured him she was not. She knew she had made mistakes in the past and had come to continue a matter they had left unresolved, the outfit. The last time she had worn that special outfit, Anne did not even need to ask if it looked good on her. Moon's expression said everything. He was so stunned that he could only give a thumbs up while his nose began to bleed. The reason Anne had prepared everything that way was because she wanted something more private between the two of them, and also because she knew that everything she had done up to that point had been a mistake. For that reason, on that night, she was willing to do everything according to her young master's desire. In short, Moon could do whatever he wanted with her. Perhaps in the end, having faith in the lunatics of that world really did work. After all, Anne had indeed been converted. But jokes aside, the next morning, Anne woke up and noticed Moon was no longer by her side. Desperate, she ran through the mansion in search of him. On the way, she heard some meowing, and when she reached the front door, she found the other maids holding cats in their arms. According to Noel, the one who had brought those cats was none other than Moon. He had bought the felines from a girl named Winnie, who was giving them away because her parents were allergic. Even so, she still took care of them on the street. The problem was that the following month, classes would begin and she would no longer be able to care for the cats. Because of that, she decided to give them away. Still, Moon insisted on paying. He gave 200 millias for the cats. He intended to buy only one, but Winnie refused to sell them separately. She wanted the 4 of them to stay together as a family, so she made Moon take them all. At the moment, only 3 were there because Moon had the last one. Meanwhile, Anne ran to Moon's room. There, she found him playing with the kitten. As soon as Lou saw the scene, she panicked, thinking he had left without telling her. Moon reassured her, saying she did not need to worry. On the way back to Belland, Moon remembered a conversation in which he had asked her what color of cat she liked most. He had imagined that she wanted a pet, so he decided to look for one with the characteristics she mentioned: blue fur and blue eyes. As soon as he found one, he bought the little creature with the intention of giving it to her. The reason for the gift was simple. The following week, classes would begin at the academy. He would have to leave, and according to the rules, the maids could not accompany him. She would also have to stay in the duchy to take care of other responsibilities. Because of that, he wanted to leave the kitten with her as a form of company. From Lou's expression, it was clear that she liked the gift. When night fell and Moon was already lying down, he began to reflect on everything that had happened. He remembered that his shadow step technique had evolved to level 3. Other than that, there were not many new developments. At least he had managed to make Lu return to normal, which meant the previous prophecy had been resolved. The new challenge was to avoid provoking the arrogant heroine of the original novel, Ariel. She was the protagonist, and for that reason, any involvement with her would be dangerous. In the middle of those thoughts, Anne appeared in the room, saying that she already missed him and did not want to see him leave. Moon allowed her to enter, and as soon as he did, she showed interest in starting a more intimate relationship. However, Moon asked her to calm down. He only wanted to lie beside her and hold her hands, because he believed that love was not limited to physical contact. There was also the emotional connection, and he wanted to build that. Anne, in turn, revealed that the 4 months he would spend at the academy felt like far too long for her to stay away. She missed his scent, the warmth of his presence, and she could no longer hold back her feelings. On the outside, Moon showed that he agreed, but inside he wanted to maintain his composure and act like a gentleman. Even so, he decided that this time he would be the one to take the lead. While the two of them gave in to the moment, the Black Book revealed certain information. The jealousy process had reached 100%, a destiny of intervention had been activated, and a partial memory erasure process had also begun. In another place, more specifically in the girls' baths of Santa Maria Academy, Ariel was excited to have finally arrived. Beside her was Leah, who soon asked her to lower her voice, because even though classes had not started yet, there were still teachers nearby. Even so, the usual girl jokes began, with questions about who had the more developed body, comments and comparisons that eventually turned into humor. In addition, Leah's hair was starting to turn more blonde because of the divine power she carried. But she did not like that change very much, since Ariel had a certain aversion to the color blonde. In truth, the blonde that Ariel could not stand was precisely the protagonist, Moon, and that transformation bothered her. Still, Ariel assured her that no matter how much Leah changed, she would never hate her. Even with that statement, just hearing the name M. Campbell already made Ariel irritated. She warned Leah to never go near that cursed person, claiming that he only brought bad luck. According to her, the proof was the murder that occurred during his coming-of-age ceremony, a case that, in reality, was not even directly Moon's fault, since according to the version released by the royal family, he had helped Princess Celia during the incident. Besides that, it was Leah herself who saved Moon that day, using her healing blessing. She managed to keep Moon alive until the royal court arrived and treated his wounds. In other words, he had not only protected the princess but had also shown courage, something that deserved some recognition. Even so, Ariel still refused to accept it. She said she could not believe that someone like him could be the son of the Duke and Duchess Campbell. However, she admitted that he had changed. From the cold boy who barely remembered the names of people, he now seemed like someone different. Despite that, she preferred to drop the subject and return to her bath. 3 days later, Moon finally arrived at Santa Maria Academy. Just by looking at the size of the place, it was clear why it was considered the largest academy in the entire empire. He was excited, especially because it had been more than 10 years in his previous life since he last attended a school. He was curious to feel again what it was like to sit in a classroom. But his thoughts were interrupted when he heard some students talking about a fight that was about to happen. Curious as always, Moon went straight to the place where the commotion was taking place. When he arrived, he saw that the ones involved were Ariel and a young man named Eamon, known as the Wolf of Campbell. The argument had started because Eamon did not accept the fact that Ariel was the heiress of the Bard family, since she was a bastard child and did not have an official title. After exchanging some insults, Eamon formally challenged her. This did not surprise the other students much, since Ariel was always the target of criticism and provocations for being a half-blood. While watching the scene, Moon thought that she truly was the protagonist of the story, since she faced as many enemies as he did. Ariel, for her part, mocked the situation. She said that if they were holding a tournament, it could only be for them to lose against her, because such insistence was unbelievable. The last time they sent an opponent named Gru, whom she defeated with ease. But Eamon guaranteed that this time would be different. He was the Wolf of Campbell, and for that reason, things would change. Upon hearing that, Moon felt a shiver. The connection to the name Campbell was not something trivial, and suddenly someone in the crowd recognized Moon and pointed out that the mastermind behind all of that had finally appeared. The protagonist, Moon, did not understand anything that was happening, and began to ask himself how he had ended up in that situation. The idiot who was fighting Ariel was actually one of his subordinates. It was obvious from the name, Eamon, the Wolf of Campbell. Besides that, the rumors about Moon Campbell were so absurd that, according to some girls, just by looking at him, they became pregnant. There was a place in the academy called the Opposite of the Suicidal, where he spent most of his time. According to those stories, the number of girls that Moon had ruined already surpassed an entire class. Meanwhile, Moon remained confused, questioning what he had done in the past to deserve such a terrible reputation. At that moment, Ariel appeared, complaining explaining that Amon's lackeys were still trying to attack her and that he, as always, was useless for allowing it. In that situation, Moon took a few steps forward, and everyone expected the fight to begin. However, he simply apologized, leaving everyone speechless, including Moon himself, who wondered what he was doing. He explained mentally that he was doing it to erase the humiliation from the previous semester. No one had told him anything. It was entirely his own idea. Then Moon pulled Amon back and said that he also needed to apologize, because it was part of his plan. After apologizing, they could accept the millias he was offering and go out to eat something. Amon, moved, became even more surprised when Moon called him brother. In the next moment, Amon and his lackeys apologized in front of everyone. Ariel was intrigued and asked Moon what he was up to. He explained that he had originally wanted to apologize only to her, but the situation required improvisation, and he had to handle everything the best way he could. Ariel still did not believe him, wondering if he needed to kneel or something like that, but she dismissed the idea. To her, it was obvious that Moon was getting close to Leah, since she had seen him watching her classmates at the party. Moon denied the accusation, saying it had nothing to do with that. He explained that, in truth, he liked smaller girls. He argued that bigger ones were nice, but did not fit well in the hand, while smaller ones were perfect to hold firmly, like a steel plate. Before he could finish his explanation, he took a punch right in the mouth. At that moment, Ariel questioned whether he was just flirting, remembering that, as far as she knew, all of Moon's previous victims had large chests. The thought came suddenly, but it made sense to Moon. He had said he was only joking, but deep down he really did want to apologize to Ariel. For that, he had prepared a gift, but he had not managed to bring anything except 1 million Amelias from his allowance. With nothing else to offer, he ended up giving her only a meat skewer, promising that he would give her the real present once he got better. While he was running, Moon reflected on how he wished his relationship with Ariel could become one of colleagues and not enemies. However, his thoughts were interrupted when she called him by his name and stated that 1 million Amelias was a present she would definitely accept. In the end, she was an ordinary person, despite still carrying the title of fallen noble. As the two continued running, another girl watched everything from above. She thought to herself that such an offer of 1 million Amelias was something even she would accept. As she thought about Moon Campbell, she started wondering whether she should tease the boy a little, since he was only a fiancé who would probably never take that promise seriously. Because of that, she imagined that Celia would not be upset if she decided to get closer to him. The scene then shifted to the principal of Santa Maria Academy, Prang, who was speaking with Professor Grant, responsible for the potion department. They analyzed everything that had happened recently. The principal did not believe that Moon had changed because the previous year he practically did nothing except learn a single light spell. In 50 years of his career, he considered Moon the dumbest student he had ever taught. Upon hearing that statement, Grant asked why the principal did not simply expel Moon from the academy. The explanation involved politics. Although Duke Lion would easily accept the justification that the boy had no talent for magic, possibly sending Moon to the army, the real problem was noise. Her family, the Phillips, had helped the Empire financially and contributed to securing the Emperor's throne. Expelling Moon at that moment could cause enormous political conflict. While the principal spoke, Grant observed Moon's recent behavior, noting that he had picked up trash from the ground, helped a bird back to its nest, and even offered a handkerchief to a heartbroken girl. The protagonist's attitude had startled the girl, who did not expect such kindness. To top it off, he even bowed to the statue of the Academy's first principal. Looking at that statue beside Moon, Grant remembered that in the original story, the real Moon had cut off the head of that very statue. The cut on the statue was visible, especially because the repair had been done with extremely poor quality glue. Meanwhile, beside Principal Prang and Professor Grant, neither of them had bowed to the statue. The professor then asked how the principal planned to eat an entire table, since he himself had declared that if Moon had truly changed, he would eat a table as proof. The principal replied that a single day was not enough to confirm a real change. To him, no one would completely change their personality during a single vacation. Grant, on the other hand, believed that at the very least, that year was going to be interesting. Later in the student dormitory, Moon received the key to his room, number 526. He politely thanked the receptionist and wished her a good day, which surprised her since she knew Moon as the troublemaker of the academy. Even so, she started finding him polite and even charming. When he entered the room, Moon noticed that the space was quite large. With nothing urgent to do, since the entrance ceremony would only take place the next day, he took a bath and relaxed. Afterward, when he looked at himself in the mirror, he noticed that his body was much more elegant than before, but a huge scar on his back caught his attention. He knew that something like that could happen, but he did not imagine that the mark would remain carved directly into his body. The scar was the result of the residual energy left by the corrupted king. His ability had not been fully absorbed by the Black Book, but it was not useful either, since it was only a small flame that went out with a simple breath. Even so, the fact that the flame had remained meant that the corrupted king wanted something more from the protagonist, like those games that offer a cheap starting gift and then begin charging more and more until the person ends up in debt. Moon decided that he would not get involved with anything related to evil gods, whether corrupted king, god of love, or any other. He would use the protection of the academy to block those influences. The real problem was that he was still weak and needed to train his abilities. Fortunately, he had the Black Book to do that. The moment he entered the space of the book again, he announced that he was beginning attempt number 197. His opponent once again was Rod. Meanwhile, in the girls' dormitory, Leah arrived at Ariel's room, who had just gotten out of the bath. Leah wanted to know if she had really accepted Moon Campbell's apology, but Ariel explained that she had not. The news, however, had already spread, and Leah was surprised as she asked if the rumors were true. Ariel said she had only apologized in front of everyone, nothing more. But Leah was talking about the rumor that she and Moon had had a child, something that left Ariel completely stunned. When she looked at the newspaper, Ariel found a completely fabricated story. They claimed that she and Moon were dating, that they had been intimate, and that the relationship had ended only to protect the reputation of the Campbell family. According to the rumor, that was the reason behind the public apology. Seeing that absurdity, Ariel decided that the next day she would personally go to the press club to resolve the situation, because being described as Moon Campbell's ex-girlfriend, especially with a made-up child, was too much. She even took advantage of the situation to vent some frustration on Leah's classmates in a chaotic girl group joke that was not even worth detailing. After a while, Leah said she needed to return to her own room because she still had to take a shower and practice some life magic before going to sleep. After Leah left, Ariel remained lying down, completely furious about all those ridiculous rumors. Even so, she set that confusion aside for a moment because she had another problem to solve: money. The black market had been wiped out, so she could no longer earn money the way she had before. Because of that, she decided to ask her master if there was another way to earn income. Her master was an impressive figure. She emerged from inside a ring and had silver hair, a combination that always gave the impression of immense power. Her master made it clear that there were many ways to earn money, especially since she had already reached the level of Golden Mage. However, most of the options presented did not please Ariel, since they all required too much work. Perceiving the resistance, the master commented that there was a very simple, quick, and effortless solution. It was so convenient that it even seemed suspicious, but in Ariel's case, it actually made some sense. According to the master, all she needed to do was accept those 1 million Amelias that Moon Campbell had offered earlier. Ariel, however, refused immediately. She said she was a woman who followed her principles and would not sell her dignity or her word for a mere 1 million. The master insisted, asking if she would refuse even if it were 2 million or even 10 million. Ariel rejected every possibility without hesitation. Faced with that, the master concluded that it was truly disappointing because apparently the boy had been completely sincere when making the offer. On the other side of the school, Professor Preng was walking as he did every day at 6 in the morning. According to him, constant effort always brought rewards. To the professor, it was disappointing that no student was dedicating themselves at that hour, which he saw as a clear sign of lack of discipline. However, suddenly a student passed by him. That immediately made him pleased, since discipline was an essential quality of the truly strong. He even considered honoring the student, since he needed a good example to motivate the others. But the moment he called out to the young man and realized it was Moon Campbell, he was completely shocked. Moon calmly explained that, although running didn't help much with physical development, going for a run after a bath helped him stay awake during classes, especially because of the cold. And since the director didn't seem to have anything else to say, he would continue his run. Professor Preng thought about that. He realized that, in the end, Moon really did seem to have changed. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, a girl was approaching the student council room. Since she was carrying papers, she was probably one of the secretaries. She apologized directly to Celia, who was the president of the council. Early in the morning, Celia was already organizing the documents for the opening ceremony, including the speech she herself would give. When she looked at her colleague, Celia noticed the dark circles under her eyes and understood that she had probably stayed up late reading some romance novel. In this case, it was a story called The Evil and Mighty God Who Fell in Love with Me. That worried Celia, since the habit of spending nights reading could harm her magic studies. That's why she made it clear that, if that continued, she herself would take action to block those distractions. After that, Celia opened the window to let the fresh air into the office, and when she looked down, she saw Moon Campbell passing by. That bothered the secretary a little, not just because of Moon's reputation, but also because of the rumors involving him and Ariel. People said they had dated, that they had a child together, and other exaggerated stories. While the secretary was recalling those rumors, Celia flicked her lightly, explaining that all of that was exaggerated. At the end of the article, where those rumors came from, there was a line in small print saying that everything was just speculation and did not reflect reality. Because of that, Celia suggested that next time she should pay more attention to what she was reading, instead of going around repeating poorly told stories. Besides that, as student council president, Celia knew she would have to investigate who had spread those rumors. She didn't want the campus to become a place of chaos and harassment, even if the target was someone seen as inferior. And since it involved Moon Campbell, who seemed to be trying to change his image, she believed he should put in the effort to prove that he was someone worthy of trust, someone who deep down was a man worth believing in. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot and motivates me to keep bringing more content for you.